Chapter 643, Killer Lai Ming E. Chapter 643, Killer Lai Ming E. Yue Zhong then kept 2 huge tanks of the white slime, as well as the 30 cocoons into his spatial ring, before slicing open the corpse of the queen worm, Zhao Quan. The bodies of high-level mutant beasts usually had some treasures, and Yue Zhong wanted to see if this mutated life form of Zhao Quan was similar. All around his body, there were still many parasites squirming about in the disgusting red discharge. Yue Zhong did not mind the dirt or smell, as he continued to dig about until he discovered a red pearl near Zhao Quang's heart. He placed the pearl into his ring, before thoroughly slicing up Zhao Quang's corpse to confirm that there were no more treasures. He then searched the entire room, making sure that there were no more residual cocoons, before heading out to get his men to clean up. Inside this underground city, there were no more living people anymore. Other than those that had been sent out earlier as cannon fodder that was already controlled, the rest had been turned into food for that mutated Zhao Quan. However, Yue Zhong still managed to find 10,000 tons of rations, as well as a large amount of research equipment and data. There were also 300 rifles, 25 grenade launchers, and a 100-ton of fuel. The haul from this underground city was fruitful, but because Zhao Quang had become that strange progenitor of parasites, he had been unwilling to strengthen the humans that were meant to be his food. Thus, he did not allocate many resources out, barely touching the reserves of the city. Other than resources, the majority of the research equipment were all fine without any damage. As long as they were maintained, and those that had been damaged, looked at, they could all be put to use. This research lab had been the forefront of biological research before the apocalypse in China and possessed the top-of-the-range equipment. With such a lab, its resources and equipment, as long as Yue Zhong assigned some capable scientists to it, he could quickly initiate development in that area. Yue Zhong also allocated 29 of the cocoons to some of the tree ants under Bai Lu to eat, instantly resulting in 29 more Type 3 tree ants. The combat ability of these Type 3 treats could not compare to a Type 3 lightning, but 10 of them could easily force lightning to a corner. At the very least, they could tear lightning apart if they worked together. With such a huge haul, Yue Zhong and his troops made back for Chimu County. When he reached Chimu Town, Yue Zhong did not engage in any major activities, instead, focusing on training the victorious troops. At the same time, he put the troops he won over from the Kingdom of God to training. At the same time, the regiment's worth of equipment inside the Ulan Mountain Range Army Barracks had all been brought out and allocated to his troops, pushing their combat strength to the next tier. In the vast Central Plains, there were many small factions, and the Mongolian ones had all thrown their weight in with the Mongol king Yue Ran. Zhang Xiao, one skinny Chinese girl of about 15 or 16, was wearing simple clothes as she minded her sheep in a small Mongolian faction. At this time, most of the plains were still covered in snow, but a few patches had already started to sprout with grass, and the shepherds were able to allow their herd to graze again. After the apocalypse, many animals had already mutated into mutant beasts. However, there were some that did not change, instead living on obstinately. As long as they were not caught by zombies, they would not become zombified beasts as well. Yue Ran was also considered a capable warlord with charisma, nor was he lacking in intelligence. He knew that just relying on the legacies and resources left behind by the world before the apocalypse would be a bad choice, as it would run out one day. After proclaiming himself as king, he had deployed men to search for unmutated beasts to bring back to be looked after by his people. Yue Ran's actions were all for unifying a large number of Mongol shepherds. Many thus viewed him as the world savior. At the same time, since the royal blood ran in his veins, many others sought to protect him with their lives. Zhang Zhao's eyes were green, while her hands were full of whip bruises. Not only did she have to mind the sheep in the day, she would have to deal with the lust of 3 men at night. She had thought of running and tried once before. The result was that she was forced to starve for 3 days and had been whipped till she almost died. She had since lost faith and became numb. At this time, a few Mongol riders came rushing up, one of them eyeing Zhang Xiao, as a cruel look appeared on his face. He sent a vicious whip towards her and said, "Bitch, Master Hag wants to fuck you. Take off your clothes and raise your ass. Let Master Hag enjoy himself." When the whip landed on her body, it immediately split apart her clothes and left a deep, bloody gash on her frail body. Zhang Xiao immediately fell to the ground and curled up in pain, her tears and mucus flowing freely. She struggled for a while before tearing off her clothes and got on the ground to raise her butt. One of the Mongol riders roared with laughter as he pointed. "Bitch, look at that. That's a Han slut. They're the most shameless, like dogs, having no shame at all." Another got down from his horse and strode towards her. "Come, everybody at the same time." The rest of them also came towards Zhang Xiao gleefully. "This bitch still dares to run, truly seeking death. Skin her and use her to fertilize the grass. How about that? Not bad. That idea's decent." As they approached her, they began to discuss amidst laughter on how to torture and toy with Zhang Xiao. When she heard their words, her body trembled violently in fear as two streams of tears fell from her eyes. She was the princess of her household before the apocalypse. Yet after that, she had become a slave to the Mongolians, and everything had changed. She had experienced for herself the cruelty of humankind, where dignity was non-existent. The Mongolians did not let her off and were even discussing ways to torture her, and it caused her to be filled with dread. One of them laughed savagely and pulled out his curved blade. "I've decided. Let's chop off her feet. See how she runs." Another frowned and said, "Wu Tan, don't. If there's blood everywhere, it isn't going to be fun. After we're done, you can go all out." Another came up to Zhang Xiao and dropped his pants, grabbing her head and shoving it toward his crotch. "Me first. Slut, suck it for daddy." Right as Zhang Xiao's head was forced to his crotch, a powerful arrow pierced through the Mongolian's head, causing fresh blood to splatter everywhere. The warrior died with a look of shock and disbelief in his eyes. The other three Mongolian riders immediately turned towards the direction of the arrow, as a few more arrows shot out, piercing them in the chest, nailing them to the ground. 200 soldiers appeared over the horizon, riding on the back of black scaled stallions. One of the soldiers looked at his leader, Ming, and asked, "Boss, there's a girl there. What do we do? Kill her?" Ming assessed her before saying, "She must be a Han slave. Leave her alive." Ming then pulled out 2 bottles of mineral water and 5 biscuits, throwing it to her, and said coldly, "Little rascal, I'm Ming, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Brigade under the mighty Yue Zhong. If you want to live on, make your way towards Chimu town. Only by reaching there will there be a chance of survival." Zhang Xiao immediately got on her knees and cried profusely, "Take me away. I'm willing to do anything for you. Please take me away." "Sorry, little rascal. There are no saviors in this world. I still have a mission to accomplish, and I can't help you. Only you can help yourself. Chimu town is your only hope. If you want to live on, with dignity at that, head over there." Ming eyed her and shook his head before passing the order, "Kill all the sheep." The 200 soldiers immediately charged through and slaughtered every single sheep. After they were done, they began to slice up the meat and burnt the corpses. "Charge! Kill those Mongolian bastards!" Ming roared out and led 200 soldiers towards the inner parts of the faction. The Mongolian faction saw the entire herd of sheep being burnt and hurried sent out warriors, who charged at Ming and his men. In this apocalypse, the 3 main factions were always warring, and thus even the shepherds of farmers were called to arms. They were forced by the circumstances, otherwise they would become slaves to each faction. "Go die." Ming looked at the dozens of warriors running towards him and chuckled grimly, as he pointed with his right hand and a number of sharp blades made of air sliced towards them. The warriors were instantly sliced at their waists by the unseen air blades. The rest of the 200 soldiers led by Ming charged in and begun to slaughter the other warriors. With his killing intent billowing, Ming roared out, "Convey my orders. Other than all Han slaves, Everyone else has to die. Yes, the 200 soldiers behind Lai Ming hollered out with their own roars and charged through. Soon after, smoke began to rise from different places as the troops under Lai Ming killed the enemies and led the slaves out of the area. Lai Ming did not leave any troops to escort those slaves back to Chimu town. Instead, he charged right for the next one. Zhang Xiao watched as the small town went up in smokes, her eyes flashing with deep hatred. She gripped the biscuits and water in her hands tightly and turned to make her way to Chimu town. Chapter 644, Mongol-Manchu Alliance. Chapter 644, Mongol-Manchu Alliance. Out here in the vast central plains, beside a lush lake, there was a grand and awe-inspiring golden tent. Within the tent, there were a dozen men in traditional Mongolian attire standing respectfully in 2 rows. On the central seat of the emperor, a young man of about 27 or 28 sat there. His stature was commanding, with an eagle-like gaze and a hooked nose. He had handsome looks, and he was the publicly recognized Mongolian king, Yue Zhong. Bao Xi was currently venting his grievances with bloodshot eyes. "My king, our gray wolf riders were wiped out by those crazy Han dogs. Our flocks have also been burnt. Over 1,800 of our fellow Mongolians have died at the hands of those sick bastards. We seek your help in eradicating those damnable Han dogs." Lai Ming, he had seemingly transformed into a bloodthirsty demon, going on a massacre everywhere he went. For each faction he struck, he would release the Han slaves and slaughter all the Mongolians, Turks, and Manchurians. The 200 soldiers that Lai Ming led were all evolvers, and many of them wanted vengeance against either the Mongol Empire, the Turkic Empire, or Manchurian Empire. They were all similar in their viciousness and never left anyone alive. It was as though a disaster had struck the Central Plains, and the various subordinates of the 3 factions bore the brunt of their fury. Lai Ming's forces had truly attracted the ire of all 3 factions. Yue Zhong glared at Bao Xi sternly. The Mongolian Empire had been a work of his nationalistic propaganda. When he wanted to expand it further, he realized that it was hard to change this way of thinking. He had realized that integration was vital in conquering the whole China. Otherwise, when their forces try to win over other factions, they would definitely face opposition. However, in the course of the development, the Mongolian Empire was already something beyond the control of Yue Zhong. Every single Mongolian member had a number of slaves from the other races. Even his own subordinates had over hundreds and thousands of Han slaves. If he were to command them to release their slaves, his position as the Mongol king would definitely topple. Using a nationalistic and racist approach, it was easy to gather people of like minds. However, changing it would truly be tough. This was because most of the passionate ones were crazy people. The moment their leader had no way of meeting their needs, they would do all they can to change the leader. When Yue Zhong heard about the deeds of Lai Ming, he was filled with rage as well as fear. This was the revenge and backlash that he knew would happen. It was the same method that his forces had been using on the ordinary people of the Central Plains, but he had known that the Hans would not resort to such methods. It was obvious that the leader Yue Zhong and the previous Han leaders he had met were vastly different. He was a vicious and powerful wolf, just like them, and his tyrannical actions were no different from past dictators. In fact, he was even more terrifying. Amu Shidai's eyes flashed with a savage glint. "King, the Blood Eagle Riders are willing to be the vanguard. This time, we can definitely eradicate Yue Zhong's forces." Amu Shidai's son had been at one of the factions playing with women when the place was struck by Lai Ming's forces, and he had been decapitated. This caused Amu Shidai to be filled with hatred towards Yue Zhong. Yue Zhong spoke solemnly. "Then have any of you discover a way to deal with those 8 assault helicopters in Yue Zhong's hands." Hearing those words, all the generals immediately shut up. Yue Zhong had 8 Thunder Fighters, and those were rare resources that were not readily available in this apocalyptic world. It was practically impossible for anyone to withstand those mighty weapons. It was because of those thunder fighters and other advanced weaponry that the kingdom of God could expand so fast in this world. Each time, they just had to deploy 12 thunder fighters together with 200 elite soldiers and could easily demolish a 10,000-strong faction. Even if there was a 20,000-strong troop without any aerial defense, the forces of Central Plains were defenseless against those thunder fighters. In modern warfare, powerful equipment did not mean invincibility. However, without them, it was definitely a huge disadvantage. Saddam's million-strong army being defeated by the American forces was proof of that. Yue Zhong's 8 thunder fighters were like huge rocks pressurizing the 3 large factions, making it hard for them to breathe. Although Reorganizing and the rest had opened up numerous army barracks, there weren't much aerial defenses to be found. Many of them were just 14, 5mm high-caliber bullets. They also possessed about 20 surface-to-air missiles. However, Reorganizing did not have even one personnel who knew how to operate them. After all, in the battles out here in the Central Plains, almost no faction used any aerial forces. This wasn't a huge problem in the past, but now, they truly felt their helplessness. Before coming across Yue Zhong, as long as the Mongolian troops appeared with their tanks and cannons, any resistance from the smaller factions would quickly crumble. There was no use for those anti-air defenses. Even if they came across a rare evolver that could soar in the skies, the powerful guns of the Mongolian troops could fire at them until they were full of holes. They had no knowledge on dealing with aerial forces at the moment. The leader of the Demon Wolf Riders, Tuo Shu, piped, "Night battle. We can launch a night raid on them. In the dark, there's a limit to how much the thunder fighters can be utilized." That's right. Their combat strength would definitely be impaired in the night. Truly Tuo Shu. The sound of cheers and excitement resounded from the huge tent. In the night, many advanced equipment would lose their advantage as the users weren't well equipped to fight in the night. Night raids were also usually a tactic weaker forces employed against stronger ones. However, most of them still didn't possess much confidence in obtaining victory against Yue Zhong. This was because they had received news on Yue Zhong obtaining the regiment's worth of equipment in Ulan Mountain Range. Out of the 40,000 warriors of Reorganizing, only 20,000 were equipped with firearms. The rest mostly wielded melee weapons. Even then, the firearms consisted mostly of old weapons, handguns, as well as some other antiques. While it was easy for them to deal with most of the factions, it was a different story for Yue Zhong. One soldier came reporting in, "My king, the envoy from the Manchurian Empire has come to seek an audience." Reorganizing's eyes brightened up. "Let him in." A young man strode in, wearing a suit, and looked smart as he kneeled on one knee, bowing deeply. "Fan Ming from the Manchurian Empire greets the king. I pray for you to live long. Long live, long live." Reorganizing eyed the young man and spoke mildly. "You may rise." Fan Ming stood up and looked at Reorganizing. "Thank you, king. This time, the great Emperor Xianzhen had sent me here in hopes to ally with you and eradicate Yue Zhong together." His voice continued to ring out. "Yue Zhong is oppressive, violent, and cruel. The moment he appeared, many of our people suffered under him. Many innocents have died at his hands. Together with Ming, that butcher, their actions have been unbridled and cruel. If he's allowed to continue on his killing spree, the entire Central Plains will surely fall. Our great Emperor Xianzhen does not want this to happen, and hopes our forces can work together, forget our past enmity, and eradicate that demon." Most people would only see the bad side of others, yet ignore their own flaws. The Mongol Empire and Manchurian Empire had previously gone on similar violent sprees all around the Central Plains, bolstering their own forces and enslaving the Hans. They had not felt any remorse for their actions. After all, it was what their ancestors did. The law of the jungle was that the strong preyed on the weak. Yet now, when Yue Zhong did the same to them, they felt that he was evil and cruel. Reorganizing's face was expressionless, not allowing anyone to see through his thoughts. Yue Zhong has 8 powerful assault helicopters in his hands. If they're not destroyed, it's hard for us to deal with them. Fan Tianming laughed out confidently. Great king, let us deal with his 8 helicopters. Please believe in our strength. We are definitely able to deal with them. The aerial side will be handled by us, while we'll leave the ground forces to you. It's only possible for the invincible warriors of the Mongolian Empire to possibly wipe out Yue Zhong, that beast. Hue Ran replied dryly. Oh, I want to know how you will deal with those helicopters. Without certainty of victory, I will not send my troops out. Fan Tianming seemed to hesitate for a while, before gritting his teeth and pulling out a tablet and opening it up. Great king, this is what we will use to defeat Yue Zhong's helicopters. Everybody's gaze fell onto the tablet inside the tent, only to discover 12 Thunder Fighters sitting quietly on a large field. Behind the 12 Thunder Fighters, there were 12 other Eurocopters. A number of Manchurian troops were currently busying themselves together with some Europeans beside the powerful mechanical beasts. Chapter 645, Pressure of the Army. Chapter 645, Pressure of the Army. 24 assault helicopters. Seeing the video, all the Mongolian generals sucked in a breath of cold air. A single assault helicopter was a powerful killing machine already. If a single faction could control just one, it could easily dominate its peers. Few factions could actually withstand the assault from a single assault helicopter. The Manchurian Empire had a few as well, but they treated them as treasures and would definitely not possess 24 of them. After all, before the apocalypse, Mongolia was a country as well, and based on their public records, they did not have more than 100 of them. In the apocalyptic world, where resources were scarce, it was shocking to see the Manchurian Empire in possession of 24 of them. Hue Ran turned to fix his glare on Fan Tianming, with a changed expression and unconcealed shock. How did you get these? Fan Tianming laughed lightly in response. Great king, this is a national secret. It's not convenient to say. However, you can be rest assured that after we have jointly eradicated Yue Zhong, my country is willing to give you 4 of them. Hue Ran ignored his standing and immediately walked down, pointing to one of the Thunder Fighters. All right. However, I want 4 of those. He had understood the might and threat of the Thunder Fighters from the mouths of Mu Shidai and Bao Xi, and hoped to possess such an advanced equipment as well. Fan Tianming took a look and immediately had an apologetic expression. Great king, I'm sorry. If it's that, we can only give you 1. The Thunder Fighters were made possible after the apocalypse, and had 3 times the might of ordinary assault helicopters. Under the same circumstances, a single Thunder Fighter could even take out 3 Eurocopters. Of course, 3 Eurocopters were enough to destroy a single Thunder Fighter. Hue Ran had a resolute gaze, as his tone became solemn. 2. After eradicating Yue Zhong, I want 2 of those. This time, I will even head out myself, and gather all of my forces to wipe Yue Zhong out. A look of delight flashed in Fan Tianming's eyes. Great. That settles it then. After the Manchurian Empire had been defeated a few times, their elites had been reduced by a lot. Although they had decided to join the Kingdom of God, the forces that were deployed to the Central Plains weren't many, and could only provide the aerial support. The only faction that had the largest land troops would be Hue Ran. As long as he was willing to provide elite soldiers, then the alliance between the both of them could well be enough to steamroll over every other faction. Hue Ran's eyes flashed with a cruel look. Good. But before then, we must first wipe out the Turks. Otherwise, if we were to allow someone else to be the fisherman, it would be a joke. Fan Tianming nodded in agreement. That's true. Then let us both first join hands to take out the Turks. Thus, the Mongolian Empire and Manchurian Empire ceased all fighting and joined hands to form a huge force. As the 2 armies began to move out, they made their way towards the grounds of the Turk Empire. One servant rushed into the golden tent of the Turk Empire, his face pale. My liege, it's bad. The Mongols and Manchurians have come attacking. Wu Tuachuo was currently naked, pressing himself against 2 beauties, furiously having pounding them. 20 other women of different body shapes and sizes with stunning looks were all naked as well, touching themselves and moaning enticingly. The entire tent was filled with an atmosphere of lust and sex. After the Gold Wolf Riders had been defeated numerous times, their strength had been reduced by 60%, and even Wu'er Tuatuo's most loyal aide Abutadama had died pitifully in the Yulon mountain range. It had a devastating effect on Wu'er Tuatuo, and since then, he hadn't been himself. Every day, he had just indulged in his carnal desires in his tent and led a life of wine and pleasure. "You fool! You dare to disrupt my pleasure! Go to hell!" It was right when Wu'er Tuatuo was feeling at a climax, and he was interrupted by such news. With a wave of his hands, a sharp disc soared out and sliced through the head of the servant. The servant slumped to the ground, dead, with a look of shock and unwillingness in his eyes. After killing that servant, he pulled out a small medicinal pill from a bottle and swallowed it, before shooting some agent into himself as a look of ecstasy overcame him. He became even more drunk in his pleasure and bit down violent on a beauty's shoulders, tearing a huge chunk of meat from her. As she bled, the girl gritted her teeth through the pain, while tears flowed down her cheeks, but she didn't dare to scream out. "My liege!" The other pillar of the Turk Empire, Donger Molei, came striding in, and saw Wu'er Tuatuo surrounded by those women, as well as the soldier who had lost his life, and shouted out, "My liege! The Mongolians and the Manchurians are attacking us right now, and the Empire needs you. How could you be playing with women now? They can be put aside for later. As long as you lead us in defeating the Mongols and Manchurians, their women are there for you to play as well. My liege, it's a critical situation for us. Please get it together." Wu'er Tuatuo continued to jack himself with drugs, immersing in a high. In his pleasure and muddled state, he roared out, "Scram! This senior have not gotten a kick yet. Donger Molei, you damn bear, get lost." Donger Molei kneeled down, aggrieved, and begun to cry out, "My liege, please get it together. Please, it is the moment of life and death for our empire. Please come to your senses. My liege." Donger Molei was of one mind to build a strong and independent Turk empire. He knew that he was only capable of killing and nothing else. The rise of the Turk Empire would require Wu'er Tuatuo. In truth, the whole empire had been built by Wu'er Tuatuo himself. Donger Molei had only been concerned with killing his enemies and did not know anything else. "Get lost! Scram! Scram!" Wu'er Tuatuo was currently going insane and sent out numerous discs flying towards Donger Molei. Donger Molei had been kneeling on the ground and hadn't been on guard against the person he respected the most. The disc shot past his neck, and his head flew through the air, rolling to one side in a shower of blood. Just like this, the strongest evolver that had crossed swords with Yue Zhong died at the hands of his own leader. With his death, the rest of the Turks felt their world crumble, as the generals all rose up and led their own forces away in different directions. The Mongolians and Manchurians were long since prepared and took the opportunity to chase down all of the forces of the Turk Empire, wiping them out. At the same time, they gobbled up the resources and people, expanding their forces. The Turk king Wu'er Tuatuo was also killed with a single hit by Ao Do, and the Turk Empire was wiped off the face of the earth, just like that. The allied forces of Manchuria and Mongolia were extremely relaxed. It was as though it was just an expedition for them, with lack of resistance from the enemy. It was easy for them because Wu'er Tuatuo had already fallen. He had lost his will, lost his fighting spirit, and the entire Turk Empire that he painstakingly raised up was shattered. After the powerful allied forces wiped out the Turk Empire, they rested for 2 days before turning around and made their way towards Chimu Town. Cloud Town was a small town near Chimu Town, and it was an important location for Chimu Town. As long as it was defended well, it could repel many enemies from the front of Chimu Town. As the first line of defense for Chimu Town, Yue Zhong had thus deployed an entire battalion to this town. At the same time, 2,000 survivors were working on the fortifications of the structures as well as traps to prepare for the impending attack. Suddenly, there was a cloud of dust in the distance, and the sentry that had been keeping guard up in a tree had a huge change in expression. He shouted into the walkie-talkie, "Enemy attack! Enemy attack!" Without the help of satellites, Yue Zhong could only employ the traditional way of leaving talented sentries in different areas. After obtaining that intel, the entire Cloud Town hurried in their actions as soldiers got into position and readied their weapons, keeping the gazes on the horizon. Li Guang stood on a high vantage point and saw the Allied forces in the distance. He muttered out with a billowing, killing intent, "So you're finally here, Allied forces? This time, I'll let you taste the might of the victorious troops." The soldiers stationed at Cloud Town were all soldiers of the victorious troops and had undergone tough military training. Every single one of them was filled with battle intent, and the assault of the Allied forces happened to be according to his wishes. The Manchurian and Mongolian empires were afraid that Yue Zhong would set his sights far ahead, and since Yue Zhong wanted to eradicate them himself, but couldn't afford to dispatch people to find their central bases, he couldn't ask for more. It might be pressurizing to deal with their forces, but likewise, it was an opportunity to deal with them once and for all. Chapter 646, The Slave Army Attacks. Chapter 646, The Slave Army Attacks. Outside Cloud Town, many ditches had been dug and killing traps prepared and planted. There were high vantage points on either side of the town, which could be used to launch assaults from. Ran eyed the battlefield from afar and gave a solemn order: "Send the slaves to go fill up the ditches." The Mongolian general Agudo in charge of the slaves looked at the 3,000 of them, noting their deadpan expressions, and hollered, "You bunch of pigs, listen up. Go fill up the ditches. As long as you do so, your families will receive benefits. Ordinary slaves will become high-class slaves, while high-class slaves will be upgraded to ordinary citizens. This is the only chance for your families and yourselves to gain freedom and dignity. Charge for this, senior." Under his roar, a glint of hope flashed in the eyes of the slaves as they hoisted bags of sand and rushed towards the ditches. Although Ran was extremely cruel to them, it could be said that his words were worth their weight in gold. With Agudo's promise, they were filled with hope for the first time. "Don't kill me. I'm Han. Don't shoot. I'm Han. Please don't shoot. I'm Korean Chinese. Don't shoot. I'm a Miao. Don't kill me. We are all fellow comrades." Under the watchful gaze of 200 soldiers, the 3,000 slaves charged forth with desperation, crying as they made their way towards Cloud Town. Making use of the commoners to attack cities, this was a vicious tactic used in the past. If the enemy went soft and allowed the commoners to fill up the holes, then the Mongolian troops could charge forth. If the enemy hardened their hearts to kill the commoners, they would expend their bullets and lower their own morale. It was truly a cold-hearted strategy. "Scram! Get out of here! Leave now! Don't come over! There are traps here! Don't come any closer!" Seeing the 3,000 slaves approaching, the soldiers in Cloud Town began to shout frantically. They would rather engage in an all-out slaughter with the Mongolians than fire at their own people. Following a loud explosion, a number of the slaves had stepped and triggered a landmine, which blasted them apart. Another triggered a mechanism, which sent arrows shooting towards them. The dense rain of arrows fell upon dozens of slaves, causing them to fall and cry in agony. All around Cloud Town, Yue Zhong's forces had planted landmines and traps. These were in fact meant for the Mongolian troops, but unfortunately, the slave army had triggered them. I don't want to die." Seeing their fellow comrades falling to the explosions and traps, one of them wailed out while retreating. Under his lead, a few others began to back up as well. Defectors will be put to death. Behind, the Mongolian forces stepped forth to cut down any slave that retreated. After the Mongolian forces killed over 30 slaves, the situation stabilized somewhat. Li Guang ordered coldly, "Snipers, kill their enforcement soldiers." Pung, pung. Following the sounds of gunshots, a number of the Mongolian soldiers fell down dead, with bullet holes in their heads. Those enforcement soldiers were slowly picked off one by the elite snipers hiding in Cloud Town. Under the threat of death, the soldiers that were initially maintaining their watch over the slaves began to fall apart, leaving behind the 30 corpses of their own comrades while fleeing. The moment they were free of the threat of the enforcement troops, the 3,000 slaves began to retreat wildly. Ran watched the scene unfold with cold eyes and ordered, "They dare to retreat without orders. Kill them all." Thus, bullets rained down from the Allied forces, killing and injuring many slaves. Agudo carried an assault rifle himself, firing wildly into the 3,000 slaves as he hollered, "You better fucking scram back. Go throw the sandbags into the trenches. Otherwise, we'll execute you. Your families will also be termed as dogs and will be punished accordingly." As the 3,000 survivors were fired at by the Allied forces, many of them were already in pools of their own blood. The rest had no choice but to turn back towards the road to hell and charge. Ran did not care about the lives of the slaves, his eyes flashing coldly. "So, they're going to employ their snipers so early on, eh? Convey my orders. Snipers attack." With his command, the elite snipers of the White Armor Army and Xie troops began to inch forward carefully and started to engage in a sniper crossfire with Yue Zhong's troops. Pung, pung. The clear gunshots rang out loudly, although they weren't concentrated, but with each gunshot, there would be 1 or 2 snipers shot dead. It could be from Yue Zhong's troops, as well as the Allied forces. The intense crossfire continued for a long while, before the Allied forces realized their losses were piling up faster. Over 20 of their snipers had been taken out by the snipers from the victorious troops, whereas they had only killed 10 of the enemy. The ex-Koji forces that Yue Zhong had successfully subjugated were mostly judges and had undergone the job change. Amongst the 1,700 of them, over 1,000 were snipers. They had all trained in sniping, and in the victorious troops, the total number of snipers were over 200. The Allied forces might have many snipers as well, but it was too little compared to Yue Zhong's troops. Furthermore, the snipers of the Allied forces could not compare to those from the victorious troops. They were outclassed and outnumbered, and thus they suffered greatly in the exchange. As both sides were still firing intensely at one another, the remaining 800 slaves carried their sandbags and got closer to those dangerous trenches. Li Guang watched the approaching slaves, and his expression turned ugly. "Open fire! Hurry, escape! Don't get too close! Quickly! Run! We're going to fire!" The soldiers of the victorious troops inside Cloud Town began to shout helplessly as they opened fire, and their shots caused the slaves to stumble and fall. The forces inside Cloud Town could not compare to the size of the Allied forces. Thus, they could only rely on the fortifications, cover, and traps. If Li Guang's heart turned soft and allowed the slaves to use their own lives to disable the traps and fill up the trenches, then the Allied forces would have an easier time. The death toll of the victorious troops would then mount, and to them, it was a loss they could not afford. One by one, the slaves fell in their blood, but there are few who managed to dump their sandbags into the trenches. One of the slaves was smart. He saw that it was death on either side, so he darted to a corner and hid himself. When the rest of the slaves saw that, they also begun to seek cover. They weren't willing to give their lives for the Allied forces, but for the sake of living on, they could only become cannon fodder, filling up the trenches and disabling the traps. "Let the snipers come down." Ran's face turned solemn as he spoke. The moment those slaves gave up, the snipers would lose their meaning. Furthermore, they were being suppressed heavily by the enemy, leaving casualties, which caused Ran and Xianzhan to feel the pinch. Without the support of a novice village, every single sniper had to be cultivated and groomed with painstaking efforts. Furthermore, they were useful against powerful experts. As long as a top sniper could hide at a distance, he could easily distract a powerful evolver, keeping him on guard. The power evolver would only be able to exhibit 80% of their power then. Those high-level evolvers might even be easily taken out by a sniper with a good hiding space. Mu, I want those hills conquered. Hua Ran eyed the two vantage points on either side of Cloud Town and gave an order to Mu. Hua Ran was extremely clear that it would be a huge bloodbath before they can take down Cloud Town. He wanted to find a way to crush Yue Zhong's forces and firepower quickly and swiftly. Yes, my liege. Mu bowed and rushed out. Hua Ran looked at Xianjun beside him and said, Emperor Xianjun, I'll leave the other hill to you. This time, in order to take down Yue Zhong, Hua Ran and Xianjun had bet all their forces. They were clear that with every passing day, Yue Zhong was growing stronger. If they were to lose today's battle, both Mongolia and Manchuria would become the losers, and many would become Yue Zhong's slaves. Xianjun swept a gaze towards Ao Do. Ao Do, go bring some in and take down that hill. Your servant obeys. Ao Do kneeled on one knee before leaving. Mu and Ao Do left, and the Allied forces began to launch heavy artillery fire on the two hills. Honk! Honk! Following loud explosions, a number of heavy artillery landed on the two hills, blasting the entire area. Chapter 647. Fight on the Hill. Chapter 647. Fight on the Hill. The Mongolian Empire and Manchu Empire amassed an astounding amount of weaponry before the apocalypse. Armed with heavy artillery, they began to lay heavy fire on the two hills. The battlegrounds were filled with earth-shattering explosions amidst flying debris. After 2 rounds of bombardment, the Allied forces deployed 2 companies of their respective soldiers and charged towards the hills. Under the constant heavy artillery fire, the hills were almost completely obliterated. They naturally assumed that the enemies would not be able to hold their defense position any longer. Charge! Just when the 2 companies were approaching the hills, soldiers from the victorious troops emerged from the tunnels, armed with rifles, and started firing downwards at them with mad abandon. With this sudden assault, many soldiers of the Alliance were caught unawares and killed. Get down! Get down! The Mongol general that led the troops and shouted. Bang! A loud gunshot rang out, and the general fell down dead with a bullet in his head. Snipers started wriggling out from the tunnels and began searching for strategic targets and aimed for headshots. The 4 companies of the Alliance took cover and dispersed while the ever-victorious troops continued with their relentless firing. News of the failed attack soon reached Hua Ran. Tunnels. Tunnels indeed. Yue Zhong is a terrifying character, he said, as his expression darkened. Tunnels had proven to be highly effective against cannons. During the Korean War, the Volunteer Army of North Korea made use of tunnels to defend themselves against the United States Army's ferocious bombings. Hua Ran knew deep down in his heart that this would be his toughest battle since he started his military career, after hearing that both the hilltops were covered with tunnels. General, the firepower of the enemy is too strong. Our squads cannot hold on for long. Please send for reinforcements. General, the enemy is too fierce. 2 of my squads have already been wiped out. Please send help. The Allied forces had not attacked the 2 hills for long before they began to request for help. The soldiers defending the hilltops were the elite judges that Yue Zhong had absorbed from the Kingdom of God. They had all undergone job change to be soldiers above level 20. Not only was their personal combat strength higher than ordinary humans, every one of them were strong with weapons. If any of them were placed in a special force before the apocalypse, they would be definitely the best of the best. While the Allied forces also consist of powerful elites against the stronger elites of Yue Zhong, they were suppressed until they could not even stick their heads out. Mu looked at the hilltop coldly and ordered retreat. The 2 companies quickly retreated from the hilltop like floodwater. Yuening looked at the Allied forces withdrawing, and his eyes flashed brightly, ordering retreat to the tunnels. The soldiers then scurried back into the tunnels. Honk! 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 Just after they entered the tunnels, The powerful artillery fire bombarded the hill again, intent on obliterating everything. Under that powerful fire, a few tunnels collapsed, killing 3 of the elite soldiers. After a volley of heavy fire, Zhili Mu then deployed another 2 battalions of infantry soldiers towards the hills for a second wave of attack. He knew that the soldiers situated on the hilltop weren't many. Hence, he made the vicious decision to send 2 battalions to flush out the entire place. The 2 battalions numbered almost 800. Once they stormed in, the entire hill seemed to be crawling with ants. Seeking artillery fire. Seeking artillery fire. Coordinates XX, XXX. Yue Zhong laid prone at the entrance of a tunnel and observed the Mongolian troops, barking into a walkie-talkie. Honk! Honk! From afar, the artillery forces of the victorious troops began launching their heavy fire as round after round bombarded the area and blasted everything on the surface. The terrifying artillery fire caused many of the Mongolian soldiers to be blasted apart. There was even a single 155 millimeters round that landed, causing half a platoon of soldiers to be obliterated. Under that relentless assault, the 2 battalions of soldiers suffered greatly, many dead and many more injured. Their morale plunged as they quickly sought to retreat from the hill. Damn beasts! Having sent 2 battalions of over 800 Mongolian soldiers, but losing over half of them to the artillery, with barely 300 of them making it back, Zhili Mu was beyond infuriated. These Mongol soldiers were the elite of the elites, and possessed strong fighting wills among the Mongolian forces. Each battle they emerged victorious from added to their achievements, and they were treasured greatly. Losing 500 of them at one go was a huge blow to the Mongol Empire. It wasn't easy training up a new batch of soldiers, then forging them through battles to reach the same level as these veterans. Helpless, Zhili Mu had to hesitate and rethink his strategy. In the end, he sent out 2 platoons to launch a careful attack on the hilltop. After the apocalypse, many factories were abandoned, and the amount of ammunition from each faction was limited. Each round was precious. Zhili Mu was helpless and could only make use of as little soldiers as he could to attack the hill. He was betting that the victorious troops would not spam their artillery rounds so haphazardly. It was as Zhili Mu expected. The 2 companies did not meet any artillery. However, the moment they charged up the hill, they were faced with the judge led by Yue Zhong as both sides engaged in a merciless gunfight. One by one, the Mongolian squads would try to storm up the hill, but they were quickly forced to retreat. Most of them were the elites of the Mongolian Empire, but compared to Yue Zhong and the ex-Koji forces, they were still far off. Furthermore, Yue Zhong and his troops possessed the advantage of high ground. Thus, it was practically suicide for the Mongolian troops. Hua Ran's face was extremely dark as he stood in the camp. The assault had been going on for the entire morning, without any progress, and the death toll of the Allied forces had already reached 1,000 people. It was enough to turn his expression ugly. This Yue Zhong actually managed to make use of these 2 hills to give us so much trouble. He truly is a terrifying person. We can't let him expand his power any longer, otherwise we'll all die. His line of thinking was correct. After all, Yue Zhong had gained the evolving temple and was constantly churning out elite soldiers. As long as he had enough time, he could even make use of the forces from Guangxi and Hunan to come to the central plains in the Sky Fortress. It was precisely due to this that Yue Zhong was quietly training his troops and only sent Li Ming out on his rampage, destroying the minor camps of the Mongolian and Manchurian Empire. He needed time to expand. However, Hua Ran and Xianzhen were not just simple warlords, and were even willing to let go of their past enmity to join hands and deal with Yue Zhong. Hua Ran looked at the 2 hills and shouted viciously, "Convey my orders. I want Zhili Mu to take down that hill by today. He has over 10,000 of my brave warriors, and he can't even take down a simple hill? What the fuck is this? If he doesn't accomplish this, he can scram out of my sight." When Zhili Mu heard it, his eyes turned bloodshot and quickly summoned over 100 enhancers of the Shui troops, as well as other enhancers of over level 20. Our Mongolian Empire is the strongest country in the world. For the sake of our country, charge. Take down this location. Everyone will be promoted by 3 ranks, with 10 beauties as gifts and 100 sheep and cows. Kill! 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 The Mongolians began to roar out in excitement. Zhili Mu roared out and brought the 300 of them as they charged up the hill. Yue Zhong was hiding in one tunnel and saw the Mongolian forces rushing towards them. They began to fire wildly again. Air barriers, stone shields, bone spears, these were all abilities of the high-level enhancers. There were even some high-level evolvers among them that could employ strange abilities to charge through the bullets without being injured. Their tactic was to have 5 of them take on one of Yue Zhong's forces. Yue Zhong and his troops realized their bullets were being defended against. It was hard to kill them off when their reaction was fast. An enhancer troop? Call for an artillery strike. Calling for artillery. Coordinates XX, XXX. Yue Zhong watched as the Mongolian forces employed their abilities and roared into his walkie-talkie. Hong! 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 The dense artillery fire rained down on the hilltop again. The barriers made up of air were shattered, and 5 Shui soldiers taking cover beneath it were instantly blasted apart. Another round landed on a stone shield, disintegrating with a loud blast, taking out the soldier under it as well. There were multiple holes on the hill that were half the size of a football field. One round also landed on the bone users, causing the strength evolver to be swallowed in the blast radius. In the face of the heavy artillery fire, the Shui soldiers could not even defend themselves. As long as they were struck, they would be blasted to pieces. Charge! Only by charging up, we will survive. Amidst the artillery fire, Zhili Mu roared out as he swung his silver cleaver madly, making his way up the hill. Chapter 648, Night Raid on the Manchu Camp. Chapter 648, Night Raid on the Manchu Camp. The surviving members of the Shui army and Mongol army were led by Zhili Mu towards the peak of the hill amidst the artillery fire. It was the safest there, since the victorious troops would not rain artillery on their own people. As a peak evolver, Zhili Mu's speed was terrifying when he went all out. He was like a gust of wind that evaded the countless bullets as he reached one of the tunnels at the top of the hill. With a flash of his cleaver, 2 elite soldiers were slaughtered. Having killed those 2 elites, Zhili Mu leaped into the tunnel and began to hunt down the other elite soldiers inside. He was like a fierce killing god, slaughtering any soldier he came across. No one was a match for him. Zhili Mu had been renowned as a fierce general within the Mongolian troops. Many camps and factions that he laid siege on could not withstand his might, and he had even personally taken out multiple evolvers in those factions. As the Mongolian Empire grew and expanded, he had rarely stepped out to engage in slaughter at the front lines. However, with Hua Rant's orders, he had no choice but to charge in order to take down the hill in front of them. Yue Zhong heard the screams and wails of the soldiers, his own eyes also flashing with bloodlust as he pressed a detonator in his hands. Damn bastard! Go to hell! Hong! Hong! Following a loud explosion that seemed to shake the earth, the tunnel that Zhili Mu charged into began to blow up. In an instant, he was blasted to pieces and buried within the tunnel. Yue Zhong knew the problems of dealing with those peak-level evolvers. One such expert could easily kill 2 elite soldiers. Only by using a large amount of explosives would a peak evolver be killed. Hence, on the front lines, there had been many explosives prepared beforehand to deal with those evolvers specifically. General Zhili Mu is dead. How did it become like this? Zhili Mu is dead. The elites of the Shui troops, as well as the Mongolian troops, had reached near the top of the hill, and when they saw the explosion consuming Zhili Mu, their faces turned ashen. The fighting spirit crumbled instantly as they retreated quickly. As they fled, from time to time, some of their numbers would be picked off by the snipers hidden on top of the hill, causing them to flee faster. Yue watched them retreat and heaved a sigh of relief. The elites of the Allied forces were truly not easy to deal with. Without the support of the heavy artillery, their hill might have been taken by the enemy. However, because of the timely artillery strike, they had miraculously retained control over the hill. It was at a price of 21 of their brothers. When Ran heard news of Mu's death, his face fell as he questioned, "What? Mu is dead? Are you certain?" One soldier who had a bandage over one of his eyes, having been blinded in the battle earlier, kneeled on the ground as he teared up. "Great King, I saw it personally. Great King, you must seek vengeance for General Mu." Ran's face was pale as he waved his hands to dismiss the soldiers. "You may go." Mu was one of the 4 generals under Ran that had followed him on all his conquests from the beginning, and he actually died at this place, giving him a bad feeling. He roared out loud, "Yue Zhong, I'll definitely not let you off. I will wipe you off the face of earth and use your head as offering to Mu's soul." The battle continued fervently as the Allied forces continued to send elites up. The sides fought their hearts out for the location point. The hills became a cruel meat grinder, claiming the lives of the Allied forces. At the same time, many of the elites of the victorious troops were buried in the tunnels forever. The intense battle continued for an entire day, with over 1,000 more deaths from the Allied forces. As for the victorious troops, they lost about 60 men, with 40 heavily injured. The battle lasted till evening, before the Allied forces finally retreated to their camps. Inside the camp, Ran frowned and asked anxiously, "Does anyone have any suggestions?" The 2 hills had already cost them 1,000 soldiers, and Ran was starting to become more wary of Yue Zhong. He had led over 60,000 soldiers together with 10,000 of the Manchurian troops, a total of 70,000 people. He had thought that he could crush Yue Zhong's power as easily as taking a sweet from a baby. However, they were already impeded at Cloud Town, and he couldn't help but feel a rising sense of trepidation. 70,000 soldiers required a large amount of food. The Allied forces had already deployed a large number of slaves and citizens to transport food to the battlefield. However, they definitely could not drag this on for too long, otherwise their rations would deplete quickly. Do spoke up. "The enemy is able to maintain their position because of the artillery support from behind. I feel we should scatter our forces and attack them from 3 different angles, so that their artillery support cannot focus fire. This is the only way to obtain victory." Amu Shidai replied solemnly, "That's right. I agree with Do. Today we have been too focused on getting the hills, and had not managed to send any men up on the hills. That is why we can't win them." Although they had 70,000 soldiers, there was only a limited number they could place up on the hill. If they sent too many, then the artillery from the victorious troops would go trigger-happy and blast the soldiers on top to death. It was because of this that Yue and the rest were confident in defending their positions. Otherwise, if all 3,000 were to flush out the entire hill, their numbers were definitely enough to tear the forces of Yue into pieces. Bao Xi replied, "I feel that we should employ the advantage of numbers and attack multiple positions at once. That way, tomorrow, we're sure to obtain Cloud Town." The rest of the generals also gave their own suggestions. They all tried to bank on the fact of them having superior numbers. Furthermore, with the 24 assault helicopters waiting behind, they were naturally filled with confidence in dealing with Yue Zhong. As the meeting went on for a while, by the time it ended, the generals all retreated back to their own quarters to rest for the night, in preparation for the battle the next day. In the dark of the night, a 1,000-strong army of riders appeared in the distance. Yue Zhong eyed the huge campsite containing the Allied forces, his eyes flashing with a strange glint. 70,000 strong, you guys sure gave me face. You actually deployed so many to attack me. That's fine by me. At least now I can deal with the whole lot of you. Otherwise, it'll be troublesome to go search for you all." Yue Zhong then pointed to the campsite coldly. "Bai Lu, eradicate them all. Wipe out anything that resists, and anything that moves. Yes, master, Bai Lu replied warmly, waving her hands, and a powerful spirit wave enveloped all the treants nearby. There were 1,000 treants, 10 Type 3 treants, 6 high-level treants, and they began to charge towards the campsite. Borrowing the cover of the night, the army of treants got close to the campsite. The 10 Type 3 treants took the vanguard position, with a speed that reached the sound barrier, tearing apart all the defenses, steel barbed wires, obstructions, and charged right into the camp. What's that? One soldier found his vision turning blur up on the watchtower, when suddenly the Type 3 treant appeared right in front of him, and with a flash, his brain was torn apart by the claws of the treant. A Type 3 mutant beast was a terrifying existence, and while the combat ability of the 3 Type 3 treants could not compare to lightning, and had no innate abilities, their combat strength was something else. The moment they charged through the group of people, they easily ripped the heads of the soldiers apart. The moment the 10 Type 3 treants charged into the campsite, they began to slaughter the soldiers. The moment any soldier revealed their face, they were instantly decapitated. The 6 high-level treants were like tanks that steamrolled through the camp, their hands smashing through the defenses easily, and every fist of theirs could pummel any resistance into a pulp. A large number of the low-level treants charged through the holes in the camp made by the high-level treants, and poured into the camp like a flood. Kill! Yue Zhong rode on one black-scaled stallion, hugging Yin Shuang close to him, leading 1,000 elites right into the camp. Faced with the sudden night raid, the entire camp was plunged into chaos, and the soldiers could not locate their commanders, nor the other way around, and whenever a soldier popped out from a tent, they would have their neck twisted. There were over 10,000 soldiers in the Manchu camp, but the true elites only numbered about 3,000. The rest were just reinforcements. Most of these fresh soldiers had never been forged through the flames of battle, and their equipment was lacking. Many of them even used melee weapons. When faced with such a sudden attack, they were plunged into chaos, and they began to scream around like headless chickens before being torn apart by the treants or slaughtered by the soldiers under Yue Zhong. Chapter 649, Defeating the Manchu Troops. Chapter 649, Defeating the Manchu Troops. The entire Manchu camp was thrown into chaos. At this time, Ao Do leaped up, destroying the tent he was sleeping in as he appeared on the roof. With a resounding roar, he howled, "I'm Ao Do. Everyone stop panicking. Gather on me." Ao Do was like godlike existence in Manchuria, and his position was only slightly behind the beloved Emperor Aizen Joro Xianzhen. Hearing his call, all the soldiers regained their composure and quickly made their way towards him. No good. Like this, it will get more troublesome. Yue Zhong looked at Ao Do and furrowed his brows. He pointed to him and told Yin Shuang, help me kill that person." In this night raid, Yue Zhong had invested plenty, and he wanted to at least cause the breakdown of the Manchu troops. If he could not, then with the combined might of the allied forces would cause him problems in the battle tomorrow. "Got it, father. I'll go kill that baddie. You must reward me later, oh." Yin Shuang smiled sweetly at Yue Zhong, and with a gust of wind, she disappeared from his embrace, charging for Ao Do. Yin Shuang charged at Ao Do, her looks exquisite. However, every soldier of Yue Zhong knew of this terrifying lowly. One by one, many of the Manchurian soldiers had their brains exploding. They were all killed by Yin Shuang, revealing her terrifying physical power. If it was a comparison in close combat, Yue Zhong knew he wasn't her match. This lowly that came out of that mutant-infected womb was truly overpowered, and no one under Yue Zhong could even hope to stand against her. Right on time, Ao Do roared in rage, activating his battle blood Do Chi, as a blood Chi covered his body, raising his constitution. He could now catch Yin Shuang's movements, albeit forcefully, and sent a terrifying fist that whistled through the air at Yin Shuang. Yin Shuang had no expression on her face, as she sent a fist to meet his. Both fists clashed as a powerful shockwave blasted outwards. Aodo's entire right arm was shattered by Yue Zhong's strength, exploding in a cloud of blood and meat. Although he had channeled his blood do qi and enhanced his constitution, he could not withstand Yue Zhong's might. He had already channeled his blood do qi together with his second order berserker strength, and yet he still could not take on Yue Zhong's fist. After destroying Aodo's fist, Yue Zhong's left fist followed up with a whistling sound, landing on Aodo's head like a shooting star. With a loud blast, Aodo's was blasted by that blow. In the dark of the night, Yue Zhong's silver hair, as well as her expressionless face, gave off a feeling of an underaged goddess. Sir Aodo is dead. Fucking beast! Everybody charge! Kill her to avenge Sir Aodo. The 100 personal guards of Aodo gathered closer, each of them his loyal subordinates. The moment they saw him killed by Yue Zhong, their expressions turned to one of anguish and grief as they charged at her mindlessly. However, it was in vain. All of Father's enemies must die. Yue Zhong eyed those incoming guards, and her face flashed with a bright smile, before she rushed at them and unleashed a massacre. Before they could react in time, their heads were blasted apart one by the specter-like Yue Zhong. The rest of the soldiers began to shout, "Aodo is dead. Everyone flee! Sir Aodo is dead. Aodo is dead." No! The news of Aodo's death quickly spread like wildfire amongst his troops, and the moment they heard it, they lost all their fighting spirit and quickly fled. Damn bastards! They actually killed Aodo. Xianzhen was hidden in a corner. When he saw Aodo killed, he was full of rage and fear. Right now, it was an atmosphere of heightened fear. If Xianzhen came forth and called for the troops to gather on him, they might still have a fighting chance. However, he was extremely clear. If he stood forth now, Yue Zhong would gather all his elites to turn him into minced paste. Xianzhen had only about 30 Chieshui troops as his guards right now, and although they were all elite evolvers, he didn't have much confidence they could stand up to Yue Zhong's troops. One of them turned to ask Xianzhen, "My liege, what do we do now?" Xianzhen gritted his teeth and responded sullenly, "Retreat." Towards Huer ran, "We might stand a chance to rise again." After making up his mind, he led the personal guards of his, as well as the hundreds of scattered soldiers, towards the Mongolian campsite. Yue Zhong led his troops all around the campsite, executing any Manchurian soldier they saw. They suddenly saw about 40 Westerners heading toward the corner. His eyes flashed coldly as they chased after them. Those are thunder fighters. They actually obtained such treasures. Yue Zhong quickly caught up to them and saw the 12 thunder fighters and 12 Eurocopters sitting quietly on a field, as well as the Western elite soldiers rushing for those 24 metal behemoths. Great! Great! These are all mine. Yue Zhong's eyes flashed with excitement, and he quickly leaped down from his black-scaled stallion and activated his shadow steps, turning into a shadow that flitted towards the 24 assault helicopters. While rushing there, he fired his 05 submachine gun at the Western soldiers, and they fell one by one. However, 8 of them managed to get into 4 thunder fighters, and they swiftly started up the thunder fighters. As long as they got it up into sky, they could shake Yue Zhong off. Equals. With a flash of his body, Yue Zhong appeared beside the 4 thunder fighters and activated his art of fear as a powerful spirit attack enveloped the thunder fighters, sending the Western soldiers into nightmares. Under the terrifying hallucinations, they all suffered heart attacks from the terror of their own nightmares and slumped dead on the controls. After wiping out the team of 40 Western soldiers, he quickly gave an order to his subordinates. "Men, quickly move these 24 helicopters away." A number of his subordinates arrived and transported the 24 assault helicopters away, together with a large amount of ammunition. Having struck at the heart of the Manchu campsite, Yue Zhong quickly led the troops to survey the Mongolian campsite. By now, The Mongolian campsite was already on full alert, and many of the soldiers had returned to their sentry points, eyeing Yue Zhong's troops hungrily. Yue Zhong eyed them for a moment before giving the order, retreat. By now, the Mongolian campsite had already made their preparations. If Yue Zhong insisted on charging at them, there was only the option of storming the front. Even if Yue Zhong possessed the advantage of the night, to take down a 60,000-strong army, his forces would have to pay a hefty price. Yue Zhong did not want his subordinates to die for nothing. Under Yue Zhong's order, the Traian army as well as the elite soldiers began to retreat, leaving behind a huge patch of flames in place of the Manchu camp. Xianzhen came up to Hue Ran and pleaded, "Great Khan, please help me with my revenge." Hue Ran watched the burning Manchu camp, his face turning ugly. He had never expected Yue Zhong to preemptively launch a night raid, crushing the Manchu forces. They were a force of over 10,000, with Ao Do as their general, and yet they had been defeated at Yue Zhong's hands. He was now full of caution against Yue Zhong. Hue Ran's face suddenly fell as he thought of something. "What about the helicopters in your camp?" Xianzhen's face turned ugly as well. "Not too sure. I think they must have landed in Yue Zhong's hands." Hue Ran's face fell as he cursed. "Fucking idiot. You actually allowed them to get those precious helicopters. Do you have a pig brain?" Yue Zhong already had possession of 8 Thunderfighters, and he was terrifying enough. Now that he got his hands on another 12, in addition, another 12 Eurocopters, Hue Ran did not dare think how any faction could stand up to Yue Zhong. When Xianzhen heard Hue Ran's curse, his face turned ugly, but he could not refute, and he did not dare anger Hue Ran any further. If he decided to call off the cooperation and kill Xianzhen, there was nothing he could do. Amu Shidai came in front of Hue Ran and asked seriously, "Great Khan, what do we do now?" All the Mongolian generals turned to look at Hue Ran. They were all clear that it was a dire situation now. With 32 assault helicopters, Yue Zhong had become an existence they could not deal with. Even if they charged forth with all their strength, at most, they could bring down a few, but the rest would destroy their tanks, artillery, as well as devastate their infantry. Hue Ran eyed Cloud Town in the distance, as well as Chi Mu Town behind it. Although he still had his 60,000-strong force, he knew that it was an impossible task to defeat Yue Zhong now. Being a warlord, since he was clear on the impossibility, he decided to call off the attack resolutely. "Retreat. All forces are to retreat immediately. Duichi Muge, take 3,000 riders to cover us. Make sure to cover our retreat." Chapter 650, The Mongolian Army Retreats. Chapter 650, The Mongolian Army Retreats. With the cover of the night, the 60,000-strong army of the Mongolian Empire began to retreat. Hue Ran was extremely certain that when dawn comes, Yue Zhong would lead his troops together with the 36 assault helicopters to attack his forces. At that time, his main force would definitely be defeated, and there would not be a single faction that could stand up to Yue Zhong's expansion then. They actually retreated. Seems like this Mongolian king isn't stupid. In the night, Yue Zhong rode on a black scaled stallion, while looking coldly at the retreating Mongolian army, and thought quietly. With the help of the darkness, the Allied forces' combat abilities were largely limited. Yue Zhong's troops were also not spared from it, and the only people not affected by the dark was Yue Zhong, In Shuang, Tempi Osaka, and Bai Lu, as well as a few other revolvers and the Traians. "Attack! Kill them all!" Yue Zhong then gave the cold order, before rushing towards the 3,000 forces of Duichi Muge. "Yes!" Bai Lu waved her hands as her thoughts spread out, enveloping the Traians, and their eyes flashed and became bloodshot before charging towards the 3,000 riders of Duichi Muge. Yue Zhong himself carried In Shuang with him as he rode towards the 3,000 soldiers. He had the combat strength to wipe out an entire battalion by himself. Duichi Muge noticed the army of Traians and bellowed in rage while pointing at them, shouting orders to the 3,000 riders behind him. "For the Mongolian Empire! for the heavenly Kagan, for our brothers and sisters, everybody, charge. The treants weren't very large, and many were knocked in the air by the stampede of horses before being pulverized in a meat paste by the riders behind. The 3,000 riders charged on with an acceptance of their death and managed to slice through a large number of treants, killing them. At this time, the 6 monstrous treants of about 8 m stood forwards and blocked the path of the riders. The riders slammed into the bodies of the high-level treants, and many died on impact. The treants slapped out with their huge hands, flattening dozens of riders in a meat paste. The riders in front, who had no time to stop, smashed into the treants, as though committing suicide by slamming into large boulders. The 10 Type 3 treants were also ferocious beyond comparison, striking out at the galloping horses, blasting apart the black stallions, before grabbing the riders and tearing their hearts out to gobble. Their charge was forcefully stopped by the high-level treants, and the 3,000 riders were immediately immersed in a slaughter by the treants. In the dark night, their vision was limited, and their reactions were greatly inhibited. The treants were not only unaffected, some of them were even level 30 existences, and were all extremely agile. They were like monkeys that weaved in and out, tearing out the hearts of the riders while cutting off their heads. It was truly a bloody scene. Go to hell, freaks. Go and die. Duochi Muge was a fierce evolver in his own right, and he waved his huge blade that slashed out with multiple blade beams. His agility was 15 times that of a normal person, and when he slashed out with his maximum strength, the speed of the blade beams exceeded the sound barrier. Under those tyrannical strikes, many treants were ripped to shreds. Just as he was slaughtering the treants wildly, he suddenly felt an intense sense of danger, and just when he felt it, an Odachi appeared in the dark, slicing his neck. His head rolled from his neck to the ground, with his eyes still wide open in disbelief. He did not expect that he would die like that at the hands of an assassin. The moment Duochi Muge died, the remaining 2,000 riders began to disperse in fear, having lost their will to fight. They abandoned their weapons and horses and tried to flee in different directions. Leave 300 treants behind to finish up here. The rest, follow me. Yue Zhong saw that things were almost done here and quickly gave an order to Bai Lu. She nodded and waved, sending out her brainwaves, and 500 low-level treants continued to chase after the scattered Mongolian riders, while the rest joined the 6 tank-like high-level treants as they followed Yue Zhong towards Rant's main force. The melee weapon-wielding Mongolian troops were at a disadvantage in modern warfare. Most of them were just local muscles that knew shepherding prior to the apocalypse. With a little training, they could become decent riders, but if they died, Rand didn't feel particularly bad. Yue Zhong wanted to destroy Rant's weapons and rations. The remaining 57,000 troops were retreating, but due to the darkness of the night, their speed was impeded. This was because they had plenty of rations, artillery ammunition, weapons, and other resources. Other than that, there were about 30,000 slaves other than the army, and they were utilized to move the resources as well as other tools and equipment for maintenance and menial tasks. If needed, they could also be deployed as cannon fodder, using their lives to set up traps and trenches. The 80,000 over people formed a long line of a few miles as they traveled. 8,000 strong troops were supervising the traveling. Rand had specially deployed them to prevent Yue Zhong from launching any sneak attacks. Kill. Yue Zhong led the Tran army and quickly caught up with Rand's troops. He observed the long procession carefully and immediately called for an attack on the tail end. The end portion of the procession was made up of mostly slaves, with only a few hundred Mongolian soldiers were supervising them cruelly. The moment those slaves made any strange moves, the Mongolian soldiers would execute them without a second word. The Type 3 treants were the fastest as they quickly charged through the end part of the procession, grabbing the heads of the Mongolian soldiers and ripping them off. Enemy attack! Enemy attack! Soon, panic screams and shouts erupted. Seeing the soldiers being killed, The slaves of other races took the opportunity to explode out, either charging and killing the distracted Mongolian soldiers, or making use of the night to flee. The Mongolians were rough with the slaves, and no one was willing to be their slaves. Although it was dangerous out in the plains, at least there was a chance of freedom. Yue Zhong watched as the end portion of the procession descended into chaos and got the trance to withdraw. Only a small odachi could be seen flashing out from time to time, killing the Mongolian soldiers instantly. When those soldiers died, the weapons in their hands were immediately grabbed by the slaves, and they would use these weapons to wreak havoc and rain vengeance upon the other soldiers in their fury and madness. The Mongolian soldiers were being slaughtered with every passing second, and there were more slaves joining in on the massacre. It was like a chain reaction, causing more of the procession to become chaotic. Four of the supervising troops that were escorting on the sides quickly charged backward like the wind. "Wipe them out!" Yue Zhong pointed to one of the 1,000-strong army as he rode his black scaled stallion right at them. All the trance followed suit and charged for the escort riders. Yin Shuang was still the fastest. The moment she leaped from Yue Zhong's arms, she turned into a gust of wind that blew right into the midst of the riders. She swung out with her pale fists, and numerous riders had their heads exploded from the impact. Following up was the 10 Type 3 trance that could tear apart the black-scaled stallions with a single claw strike, and they dug out the hearts from the riders in cruel fashion. The 6 high-level trance also charged through like tanks, every swipe of their hands flattening dozens of riders into meat paste. In a single second, the leader of the 1,000 riders had his heart ripped out by one Type 3 trance after it blasted the black-scaled stallion he was riding on. After losing their leader, the rest of the riders soon fell into confusion and panic amidst the attacks from the Type 3 trance and 6 high-level trance. Yue Zhong's forces had decimated this escort unit when 3 entire units of riders charged right for Yue Zhong from different directions. They were bravely launching an attack at Yue Zhong's units. The 3 other units of riders charged through the group of trance, making use of their momentum to kill a number of them. However, faced with the aggressive assault of the 6 high-level trance as well as the 10 Type 3 trance, their core members were quickly mutilated and torn apart, and the rest were scattered. The 6 high-level trance were basically invincible in close combat, and the bravest of warriors could charge all they wanted, but it was committing suicide. Only cannons and heavy artillery could possibly deal damage to them. Other methods might include incendiary bombs, anti-tank missiles, tank cannons, and other guided missiles. Other than those heavy weapons, normal weapons could not even hurt them the slightest bit. They were a terrifying force in Yue Zhong's hands, and for the sake of crushing the Mongolian forces, Yue Zhong had deployed almost all of them. The moment they appeared on the battlefield, their might was apparent for all to see. Having defeated the 4,000 riders, Yue Zhong led the trance on a massacre against the remaining fleeing members, not allowing them to regroup or reorganize. One general rushed hastily beside Hua ran and kneeled down, his voice urgent. "Great Khan! Great Khan! Yue Zhong, that mad dog, has chased up, and he's commanding a troop of terrifying monsters as they slaughter our back end. The slaves behind have also revolted. How should I proceed? Please advise, Great Khan." Chapter 651, Assault Throughout the Night. Chapter 651, Assault Throughout the Night. Hua Ran became furious as he exploded. "What? He chased up. Where's Duichi Muge? What the hell is he doing?" As he raged, one general came up and kneeled in front of him. "Great Khan, Gu Tuo, Fei Nanda, Hidu Obusi, Dong Dong Aramo have all gone to attack Yue Zhong and his strange army. They have all sacrificed themselves, and their subordinates are being slaughtered by that demon Yue Zhong now. Please instruct us, Great Khan." Hua Ran's face fell as his voice became a whisper. "What? Gu Tuo and the rest are all evolvers, and each of them has 1,000 subordinates. How could they have already died? How is this possible?" Gu Tuo and the rest were all evolvers, together with their 4,000 subordinates. They could even kill a peak evolver. Such a terrifying army was actually wiped out in such a short time. This caused Yue Zhong to be in disbelief. In fact, all Yue Zhong did was focus on defeating Duoqi Muge, Gu Tuo, as well as the other generals. He didn't exactly wipe them out yet. Chasing after all 7,000 riders would take up too much time with the limited trance on hand. Of course, melee combat was the swiftest and most intense. That was how Yue Zhong could easily take them on. If he was up against a modern army, then it would be a case where he might even lose hundreds on his own side. Another general came up to Yue Zhong and said, "Great Khan, the chaos is catching up and spreading towards our main force. Please give us instructions." The rebelling slaves were not suppressed in time, and the chaos and violence were mounting. Over 10,000 of them had been freed, and they were all wreaking havoc and venting their fury, killing hundreds of Mongol soldiers. Those experts who tried to rush in to quell the chaos were quickly taken out by a small odachi flashing out in the darkness. Tenpi Osaka was already an assassin when she was working for Takamajihara. When she came under Yue Zhong, she also took the Ming version 1 evolving liquid, gaining the agility solidification to its second-order stage. Now, chaos was the best environment for her, as she took to it like fish to water and dispatched multiple soldiers that tried to provide reinforcements with ease. Each time Tenpi Osaka made a move, even the strongest evolver of the Takamajihara had to be wary, not to mention the Mongolian soldiers, who were far beneath her level of strength. She could easily take out an enhancer or commander without noise and without a hint of her trace, causing even more pandemonium. The chaos from the rebelling slaves thus got worse, and it became even harder to defend against Tenpi Osaka. Yue Zhong lived up to his name as a warlord of the Central Plains. He quickly made a decision. "This time, I messed up. Amu Shidai, go lead the Blood Eagle Riders to suppress the chaos. You're free to disregard their lives. Bao Xi, you take the Grey Wolf Riders to handle the back. Focus your troops on camping and escorting. Don't engage if you don't have to. You will defend till daytime and then scatter. Report back to the Huangjing clan when you're out." Both the Blood Eagle Riders and Grey Wolf Riders were veteran warriors with decent equipment, their numbers reaching 10,000. As long as they focused on defending, even Yue Zhong would find it hard to deal with them. By leaving these 20,000 elite warriors being, Yue Zhong could be considered to have prepared himself mentally to suffer a huge loss. "Yes, my liege." Bao Xi, Mu Shidai responded respectfully and immediately left to carry out his orders. Kill them all. Kill those rebels." Amu Shidai led his 10,000 Blood Eagle Riders towards the back and clashed with the rebelling slaves. They were all slaves of different ethnicity and races and were all emaciated. They simply didn't have enough energy. They were able to cause so much mayhem purely because they had the numbers. And now, as the powerful Blood Eagle Riders rushed at them with their equipment, they quickly slaughtered these ill-prepared slaves. Many of them began to wail and cry for their fathers and mothers as they were attacked by Amu Shidai's forces, as they immediately crumbled and scattered in different directions. A large number of them disappeared into the dark of the night, and soon, the chaos was quickly brought under control. As for the 10,000 Grey Wolf Riders under Bao Xi, they carefully got into formation and released a lot of flares, lighting up the entire area. They were all holding rifles and grenade launchers as they began to fire at the advancing treants, preventing them from rushing further through their troops. Yue Zhong observed the formations of the Grey Eagle Riders and frowned. This was a well-prepared army with modern weapons. Even if he used the treants to advance forcefully, he would suffer losses. Adding on to the 10,000 Blood Eagle Riders that were rounding up the rest, if he continued to attack the Grey Wolf Riders, the Treant army would definitely be desecrated. Close combat in the dark was the most advantageous for the Treants. However, against a defense post with preparations, it was basically wasting their lives. These Treants were a powerful night raid unit. He did not want to waste them here. Yue Zhong watched them and quickly gathered the Tran army back into the night. He truly is someone difficult to deal with. Bao Xi waited together with his units and noticed that Yue Zhong did not continue his assault. He could not help but frown. If Yue Zhong had pressed on, Bao Xi would still continue his all-out defense against them, even if he knew they weren't his match. It was all just to provide more time for the rest of the army to retreat. However, Yue Zhong had responded by bringing them all back into the dark, which caused Bao Xi to be on tenterhooks, and his army could not help but maintain vigilant. Yue Zhong's move this time had led Bao Xi's subordinates to not dare underestimate Yue Zhong's troops. They had been able to wipe out the Manchurian troops, and Bao Xi did not dare let down his guard and was wary. Yue Zhong led the Trance into the dark, and they quickly routed past Bao Xi's troops as they made for the main Mongolian forces. These Trance possessed shocking stamina, and Yue Zhong himself was full of stamina and spirit. They were like fish in water as they ran in the dark, chasing up to the Mongolian forces. Kill them all. Yue Zhong gave the command as his eyes flashed viciously the moment they caught up to the main forces of the Mongolian army. He pulled out his 2M long black tooth blade, and 4 or 5 Mongolian soldiers were instantly sliced in two. Bad guys must all die. In Shuang also leaped from Yue Zhong's arms and charged right through the human crowd, going on a killing spree. Everywhere around her, the heads of some Mongolian soldiers could be seen exploding, fresh blood splattering everywhere. It was truly a gory scene. Although she was killing the enemies in a frenzy, she was wearing a smile on her face, and she looked like a vivacious little devil enjoying herself. The 10 Type 3 Trance had speeds of 34 times that of normal people, and they charged together with Yue Zhong into the midst of the soldiers. They all possessed terrifying strength and speed. Each time they lashed out, they could easily pulverize the face of an unfortunate soldier, killing him instantly. However, they preferred using their sharp claws to dig the hearts out of the soldiers' chests, gobbling them up. The 6 high-level Trance and 800 low-level Trance, 100 having been killed by the Mongolian riders, also charged right into the fray. The Mongolian soldiers were currently retreating quickly and were caught unawares. Faced with such a sudden assault, they were instantly thrown into chaos. Some of them were valiant and immediately took up their arms to fight back. Unfortunately, they were the first ones to be killed by the Trance. Even more so panicked and cried as they tried to flee in different directions, trying not to get killed by the Trance. With this sudden attack, a large number of Mongolian soldiers were wiped out, which caused a chain reaction, spreading towards the main unit in front. At this moment, 2 units with over 3,000 riders each came charging out from the main unit, and these soldiers rushed past the broken troops, making their way towards Yue Zhong's Trance viciously. Ran had already guessed that Yue Zhong might rout his units and chase after his main force, and thus, he made the preparations in deploying 10,000 riders, ready to provide assistance at a moment's call. After Ran had established his kingdom in the Central Plains, he had been on the lookout for countless rides and mounts. He found a large number of horses and cows, as well as black-scaled stallions. This was how he came to establish his huge army of riders. Facing the charge of these 6,000 troops, White Bones shot forwards, its bone claws grabbing a hold of the ground, and the bone spikes on its back transformed into a huge 200 long sharp blade that slashed out in the dark. One of the units could not see properly in the dark, and they charged forth with a terrifying momentum, coming into contact with that large bone blade of White Bones. The sharp bone blade sliced off the heads of the mounts, as well as the waists of these riders. White Bones continued to plant its limbs firmly into the ground, resisting the force of the charging riders. As the riders came charging, many of them were sliced across their waists, unable to stop in time, as their blood splattered everywhere and their organs spilled. The entire battleground was like a scene from hell. Of the 3,000 riders that charged forth, over 1,400 of them had seemingly killed themselves by running into White Bone's sharp bone blade. Chapter 652, Clash. Chapter 652, Clash. Seeing their comrades being sliced in two without any noise, the silent yet creepy scene caused many of the riders to be filled with horror. In the dark of the night, all the riders could see was pitch black, since White Bones had already evolved and its entire body was black. The riders could only see their friends charging, and suddenly, their bodies separated and fresh blood sprayed everywhere. It was enough for them to feel chills down their spines. Even the leader of the 3,000 riders, a powerful evolver, had been sliced in two in the middle of his charge. Witnessing this horrifying and mysterious scene, the remaining 1,000 riders felt apprehensive and were immediately pounced on by the trance, which had no concept of fear of death. The entire unit soon collapsed, with many of them turning to run in different directions. After defeating these 3,000 riders, Yue Zhong then led the remaining Trant army into the dark once more, chasing after the scattered soldiers like hungry wolves. The other unit of 3,000 that came to help saw the disappearance of Yue Zhong and his Trants, and they didn't dare give chase. It was a cloudy night, and there was not a single beam of moonlight. If they didn't have any torches or man-made lights, there was no way to see beyond 5 meters. Only the Trant army, led by Yue Zhong, was able to function normally in the night, while the other troops couldn't. Even Yue Zhong's own elite forces had difficulty seeing in the night, regardless of their evolver status. Hence, Yue Zhong did not mobilize them. The 3,000 riders could only watch wide-eyed and helpless, as Yue Zhong led the monstrous Trants back into the night. Yue Zhong once again led his troops past the 3,000 riders and went on an all-out charge against another part of the long processions, killing hundreds of soldiers, plunging them into panic before swiftly retreating. Under this multiple abuse, the Mongolian forces were split up but still had about 30,000 riders within the main unit. Such a number was enough to wipe out Yue Zhong's Trants easily. Yue Zhong could only rely on guerrilla tactics, as well as the cover of the night, to launch quick attacks and retreating before more reinforcements arrive. They continued to whittle down the large group bit by bit. He continued to lead the 1,000-strong Trant army to route around and attack different areas before pulling back into the night, devastating an area by killing hundreds. This caused the morale of the Mongolian soldiers to plunge continuously. In the night, the moment these Mongolian soldiers were heavily assaulted, it was hard for them to reorganize themselves. Under Yue Zhong's relentless harassing, many died or fled. If they continued like this, it was likely that the entire 30,000-strong unit would be defeated by Yue Zhong. Under the command of Bai Lu, the Trants would just pounce and eat their fill before heading back. However, under Yue Zhong's command, they made use of the darkness to exhibit their natural combat ability in the night, causing unrest amongst the 60,000 soldiers, and even crushing 10,000 of them. There was no way of comparing their effectiveness in commanding. Hua Gai, one of the generals, came up to Hua Ran and said, "Great Khan, we can't continue like this. Yue Zhong and his monsters can actually function well in the night. If we continue to retreat like this, we'll just be lambs for the slaughter. We have already lost 10,000 men because of them. We'll be torn apart if things continue." Hua Ran frowned and thought for a long while before replying, "Convey my orders. Slow down the retreat. Reform our troops." Under his order, the Mongolian army stopped rushing. Instead, they formed a sturdy formation and moved orderly. Their rate of retreat slowed down drastically, but they became like a porcupine, making it harder for Yue Zhong to act. Yue Zhong stopped leading the Trants on a blind assault. Instead, he pulled out his Bartlett sniper and picked off the ordinary soldiers one by one. It served to pressurize them further, preventing them from moving. In the dark of the night, each time the gun went off, the soldiers were filled with trepidation. They continued to advance silently, praying that the next one to be killed was not them. Their hearts were filled with pressure and fear, and there was no way of venting. Hua Ran then sent a force of 1,000 to intercept Yue Zhong. However, the moment they were separated from their main forces, they were defeated easily by Yue Zhong and his Trants, leaving only 300 that ran back pathetically. Hua Ran knew that they weren't his match in the dark. If he sent more soldiers, Yue Zhong would just retreat further and hunt his subordinates slowly. If he sent too little men, Yue Zhong would crush them easily. After experiencing these, Hua Ran stopped sending his forces out to be killed in vain. As the Mongolian soldiers prayed silently, dawn came. Seeing the sun rise, many of them couldn't but sob with relief. Just as the sun rose, Yue Zhong had already led his trance far away from the Mongolian soldiers. He could cause them misery purely because he had the cover of the night. In the dark, the 800 trance were simply not a match against the 30,000 elites of the Mongolian army. Even the 6 high-level trance would not be spared should the Mongolian army decide to pay a hefty price and used a large number of rockets and experts to sacrifice themselves. One rocket might not be able to destroy one high-level trance, but dozens of rounds would be enough to blast the trance and prevent them from recovering. Just as the Mongolian army was getting excited, from afar, 34 tanks, 60 IFVs, 100 gun-mounted vehicles, 1,000 motorcycles, as well as 4 infantry battalions appeared, pressing towards them. This elite troops might not number more than 4,000 people, but together with the armored battalion, the pressure they brought was even stronger than the 30,000 Mongolian troops. When Hua Ran saw this, his face immediately fell as he shouted in panic, "Deploy the armored division! Charge! Our Mongolian Empire is the strongest existence. As long as we destroy this troop, the entire Central Plains will be ours." Under his orders, the Mongolian Empire's trump card also came rolling out with 48 tanks, 70 IFVs, 150 gun-mounted vehicles, 3,000 motorcycles. Other than that, there was also a unit of 5,000 riders that rode with them. The moment those armored vehicles tore through the enemy lines, these riders would take the opportunity to rush in. Poor Guy looked at the incoming troops, and his expression turned dark. Thus, he stepped up to announce, "Everyone, don't be afraid. This time, we definitely can defeat Yue Zhong's troops. Our armor division is so much stronger than theirs. As long as we defeat their troops, our army has the advantage of the terrain. Relying on this advantage, we definitely have the power to rule over the Central Plains." Another general, Mu Tu'er, hollered, "That's right. The Hans defend, we Mongols attack. Yue Zhong, that fool. He only can fight for a short battle. He's definitely on a suicide mission. This battle, we can definitely destroy his army and teach him a lesson. That's definitely the case. This battle, we will definitely win." Hearing Hua Guy and Mu Tu'er's words, the rest of the Mongolian soldiers finally had smiles on their faces. At this time, the roar of motors sounded out in the skies as 30 assault helicopters flew over the Mongolian army. Seeing the 30 helicopters fly overhead, the faces of all the Mongolian soldiers fell, and their expressions turned ugly. The moment those 30 assault helicopters flew over, they released rockets and anti-tank missiles down on the Mongolian armor division. Honk, honk, honk. A number of tanks that the Mongolian army had relied on to crush their enemies were instantly turned into flaming balls under the rain of rockets. Yue Zhong's tanks also began to fire their own cannons at the Mongolian armor division, blasting numerous IFVs and armored vehicles into pieces. The Mongolian armor division thus began to focus fire towards the skies, firing at the assault helicopters, their bullets and projectiles forming a dense net. However, the 30 assault helicopters were basically like demons raining destruction from the skies. Their focus fire was enough to destroy the tanks one by one, and they could ignore the IFVs. After all, they were constructed of thick and durable materials, and it wasn't a problem braving the caliber of bullets that were fired from those gun-mounted vehicles. Yue Zhong's armored troops continued to fire at the IFVs and machine gun-mounted vehicles, and together with the cannons from the tanks, the Mongolian army began to lose their vehicles, each of them exploding in a ball of flames. The bullets that the Mongolian IFVs only managed to leave minor scratches on the tanks of Yue Zhong, with no way to tear through their armor. There was almost no damage to the other armored vehicles behind. It was only from time to time there were some stray cannon shots from the Mongolian tanks that would blast some of Yue Zhong's tanks. The armored divisions from both sides were engaged in a crazy slaughter, and the tanks from the Mongolian side were being destroyed at a rapid pace. Chapter 653. Defeating the Mongolian Army. Chapter 653. Defeating the Mongolian Army. The battle was not in the Mongolian army's favor. Once all the tanks were destroyed by the assault helicopters, they would basically be stripped of the strength to defend against Yue Zhong's tanks. For the sake of the Mongolian Empire, charge! For the sake of the Mongolian Empire, charge! Countless roars and howls of fury rang out as the two rider units let out all their frustration and charged for Yue Zhong's armored division. Most of the riders would usually wait for the moment when their enemies were breached by their own tanks before rushing in for the kill. However, since the situation now was that their own armored division was being destroyed, they had no choice but to use their own flesh and blood to engage Yue Zhong's armored troops. The 100 gun-mounted vehicles among Yue Zhong's armored division began to spew out bullets. The dense rain of metal struck the charging Mongolian riders, killing them. Go to hell! One Mongolian rider carried a rocket launcher as he charged towards one particular armored vehicle. He then flipped from the back of his horse and aimed at the vehicle before firing. With a bright flash, the armored vehicle was blasted into pieces. The Mongolian riders were truly ferocious, and they all knew that the battle today would determine the survival of two major ethnicity groups. If they lost, Yue Zhong would definitely not spare many of them, whose hands had been stained with the blood of the other races. Many of these soldiers had killed numerous people of different ethnicities. They already knew there was no retreat nor way out for them. Thus they became even more savage in this battle. However, history had proven time and again that flesh and blood and bravery would not win over metal and steel. Although these riders were all valiant in their charge against the rain of bullets, their bodies were ripped to shreds. The two units had rushed forth to face the 100 gun-mounted vehicles. Unfortunately, the dense hail of bullets caused them to crumble. The only result they got was 16 vehicles destroyed due to the efforts of some brave suicide warriors. After demolishing the 48 Mongolian tanks, the 30 assault helicopters turned to fire their machine guns at the rest of the armored vehicles, tearing apart the IFVs and gun-mounted vehicles. The assault helicopters were the bane of many armored vehicles. Of the 30, 20 of them were Thunder Fighters, which was technologically advanced and a result of the apocalyptic world. They might number only 30, but their true battle prowess was almost equivalent to 70 assault helicopters. With such a terrifying aerial attack, the vehicles on the ground were like toys being blasted apart before the 30 assault helicopters turned and made for the rest of the soldiers. Ran watched them approach, his face pale. It was as though he had aged 10 years in an instant, as he gave the order, "Convey my orders! Everyone, retreat to the Huangjin clan." With that order given, the entire Mongolian army instantly broke apart and formed many smaller groups that fled in all directions. Since the Mongolian army had a large number of horses, almost everyone had one. As they retreated on their mounts, it was truly a speedy escape. The moment the army dissipated, the rest of the armored fleet also started to flee, without any means to defend against Yue Zhong's troops. Yue Zhong's forces then took the chance to annihilate the remaining armored vehicles that were too slow to get away, before wiping them out entirely. A huge amount of rations, resources, and ammunition had been abandoned as the Mongols fled, which ended up in Yue Zhong's hands. In the first place, due to the presence of these resources, the retreat of the Mongolian army had been slow. Otherwise, the Mongolian army could have made off quickly in the night, and Yue Zhong would have been helpless. One infantry battalion was left behind to supervise the movement of the resources, while the rest of Li Guang's forces were then split into 5 parties that went after the scattered Mongolian troops. However, it wasn't too effective, as they only managed to hunt only another 2,000 Mongolian soldiers. Yue Zhong crippled the main forces of the Mongolian army, then turned his attention back to the Grey Wolf Riders and Blood Eagle Riders. These two units were made up of riders entirely, and when they saw that the situation was dire, they immediately split up in 20,000-strong groups that fled in different directions. The Central Plains were vast, and they were a heaven for riders. Yue Zhong's armored troop only managed to kill another 1,000 or so Grey Wolf Riders and Blood Eagle Riders before they had escaped far from sight. Li Guang came up to Yue Zhong, his face grinning widely. "These damn bastards, they're just like rats, running away the moment we hit them. Leader, what do we do now?" Having defeated the main force of the Mongolian army, everyone knew that the ownership over the Central Plains had just swapped hands. From now on, they were the largest faction. Any enemy that did not lower their heads would be wiped out. Thus, all of Yue Zhong's generals were in high spirits and gave, even more, effort in their endeavors. Yue Zhong's eyes gleamed as he replied, "The Huang Jin clan. As long as we take the fight there, they would be defeated and won't be a threat anymore. If the Mongolian soldiers continued to roam out in the Central Plains, it would be hard to purge them completely. If they hardened their hearts to fight it out with Yue Zhong, it was also going to be tough to take them on. The only constant that these riders would return to was the Huang Jin clan. There, they kept their resources, food, slaves, and flock. In this world where resources were scarce, it was hard to obtain any. These riders definitely have to return a Huang Jin clan to stock up or pass the goods. Should the Huang Jin clan stronghold be destroyed, then the riders would be left to fend for themselves out in the plains, either to be eaten by the mutant beasts or die of starvation. Li Ming and his troops were able to roam about the Central Plains to hunt the various factions because Yue Zhong was behind to support him. He provided the resources, ammunition, steeds, and weapons. Otherwise, they would not have been able to continue on their rampage throughout. Yue Zhong glanced at Li Guang and asked, "Li Guang, are your victorious troops still raring to go?" Li Guang immediately beamed with excitement. "Yes, our victorious troops are ever ready." At this moment, Situ Jin, who had been quiet all these while also piped in, "Leader, our Tianwei troops are still going strong as well. We're willing to be the vanguard to wipe out the enemy." Hua Ran used to be the overlord of the Central Plains and was now an enemy that Yue Zhong had to take out. Li Guang had brought his victorious troops to block the allied forces at the Battle of Cloud Town and had obtained huge merits. In the future, they were sure to become the top force under Yue Zhong. Situ Jin could sense that they were at an advantage and hoped to gain some merit so that the Tianwei troops also stood a chance at becoming the top force. A country would definitely have its main fighting force, its second line of defense, miscellaneous troops, garrison forces, and reserves as well as others. The main fighting force is definitely the one that was taken care of the most, with all sorts of advanced weapons and equipment going to them first. The rest had less priority and were utilized less on the battlefield, thus lesser chances to gain more merits and earning more resources. A unit without much morale would usually be a second-rate troop. Situ Jin hoped to bring his own forces and become the main force of Yue Zhong's Central Plains army. Yue Zhong glanced at Situ Jin. He knew that Situ Jin disliked infighting, and although he listened to orders, he had his own beliefs. He was planning for Situ Jin and his Tianwei troops to become the secondary troop, in charge of cleanups and clearing zombies. Like this, it wouldn't go against his resolution and principles. Yue Zhong thus eyed him and asked gravely, "Can the Tianwei troops do it? This battle is of utmost importance, and every soldier has to obey my command unconditionally. Situ Jin, there might be things you aren't willing to see." This time, Yue Zhong was intending to destroy the Huang Jin clan and eradicate Hua Ran's power, and for victory, he would stop at nothing. Situ Jin immediately became silent. Yue Zhong did not spare him a second look. Instead, turning to Li Guang, "Victorious troops, come with me. We shall eradicate the Huang Jin clan." Li Guang's eyes blazed with passion as he responded, "Yes, leader, our victorious troops are willing to be your sword and kill all those who oppose you. After which, Li Guang quickly followed behind Yue Zhong. Sidu Jin watched them leave and sighed heavily. He had guessed that from today on, their Tianwei troops were likely going to be the second or third force at best. Yue Zhong did not rest. Instead, immediately leading the Tran army, 1,000 elite soldiers, as well as Li Guang's forces, and charged right for the Huangjin clan stronghold. Along the way, the path was smooth, and they didn't meet much resistance. Only a few scattered riders appeared, and were quickly taken care of by the victorious troops. Not much time had passed since Hue Ran brought 1,000 of his subordinates back to the Huangjin clan stronghold, when Yue Zhong had already caught up and was killing his way in. Yue Zhong then summoned the envoy that had helped to serve the Manchurian Empire previously, Lian de Zhong, as he gave an order coldly. Lian de Zhong, you shall go and notify Hue Ran on my behalf. Get him to surrender unconditionally. I will leave him alive. Otherwise, I will attack immediately and destroy his clan, eliminating all from his family. I'm giving him an hour to consider. This is my order. Lian de Zhong's body trembled as he kneeled. Your slave obeys. Chapter 654. Advice to Surrender. Chapter 654. Advice to Surrender. Lian de Zhong was a coward with no backbone. He had served the Manchurian Empire and developed a slave mentality. The style of the Manchurian Empire had been to revert to the ancient ways, where customs and slaves were normal. Many had to refer to themselves as slaves and humble servants in front of Xianzhen. Otherwise, it was hard to gain his trust or favor. It was normal under a dictatorship in this apocalyptic times that the leader's requests are met. Yue Zhong himself would enslave his enemies, and even in his faction, there is some sort of slavery present. Xianzhen liked the style of ancient China, and his entire Manchurian Empire was more of a backward society. Lian de Zhong, this coward, thus headed out on Yue Zhong's orders, carrying a little white flag as he approached the Mongolian camp fearfully. The Mongol soldiers looked at him, bewildered. They knew that this man was the only crucial link to their survival. One general stepped forth suddenly and grabbed Lian de Zhong's shirt, barking ferociously, "Halt! What are you up to?" Lian de Zhong was scared out of his wits, and he began to stammer. This lowly one is called Lian de Zhong. I'm here on the orders of the Han Alliance's leader Yue Zhong to advise Great Khan Huaran to surrender. The general frowned and waved his hands for his soldiers to stand down. He then brought Lian de Zhong in and asked with a strange gleam in his eyes, "Did Alliance Chief Yue Zhong say anything in particular?" Right now, Yue Zhong had brought 3,000 troops to surround the Huangjin clan, which was still housing over a few tens of thousands of slaves. However, everyone knew that the slaves of the different ethnicities and races would not stand a chance against the well-equipped forces of Yue Zhong. The Mongolian Empire was truly at the edge. Under such circumstances, even the most loyal of soldiers were starting to waver. Many had already begun to harbor thoughts of surrendering to Yue Zhong. After all, he was not a foreigner, and if they lost the Huangjin clan stronghold, they would be forced to roam the central plains, which would spell death. Even if they were to take many steps back and assume that they could flee, where would they flee to? Everyone knew that Yue Zhong had almost gained control over the entire central plains. Even if they could flee now, by the time Yue Zhong fully established himself, they would have no place to escape to. Lian de Zhong swallowed his saliva before continuing. Our alliance chief had only given a broad direction, which is for Hue Ran to surrender unconditionally. As long as you guys surrender unconditionally, Yue Zhong would naturally not make things difficult. You must have heard him before. Humans won't be segregated under him. As long as they're willing to work hard, he will accept anybody. In our Tianwei troops, there are Hans, Mongols, even the Korean Chinese, Quarry, and Uyghurs are accepted. They're all living in harmony. If you guys surrender, you can definitely be part of us. The world is now under threat from the zombies. Our human population is dwindling. Leader Yue Zhong is broad-minded and has always been working towards unifying the country. He wants to accept everybody, and he treasures talents. It won't be too late to surrender to him now. With his skills and wisdom, he'll definitely unify the country. If you guys work for him now, in the future, as long as you contribute enough, you'll be part of the team of founding fathers. By then, riches and fame would come to you naturally, and your future generations will only stand to gain from your wise decisions. Yue Zhong might be someone with no backbone and like to kiss ass, but he was truly capable with his words and knew how to adjust to the situation. At the same time, he was crafty, and these all combined together to make him a formidable envoy. When the general heard his words, his heart couldn't help but itch, and his face turned warm as he chuckled. "Brother Lien, I'm called Cha Bai Lai, the vice commander of the Huangjin Guards. Let's be friends." Yue Zhong also went along with the flow as he smiled. Great, great, great. To be able to form a friendship with Brother Cha, a hero of his times, it's an honor. Why don't we become sworn brothers? Fine. From today on, we are sworn brothers. I'm 36 this year. I'm 31 this year. Big brother. Little brother. Cha Bai Lai and Yue Zhong both had their own intentions in forging this relationship. Cha Bai Lai wanted to look for someone he could rely on within Yue Zhong's circle of power, and Yue Zhong wanted to leave the Mongolian camp alive. Thus, they became friends. After becoming sworn brothers, Cha Bai Lai became extremely warm towards Yue Zhong, bringing him further into the camp. "My good brother, should Alliance Chief Yue Zhong have any likings or tendencies, please remind your big brother so I can have some preparations." Leader Yue Zhong is a hero of many skills and talents, his strength unparalleled, and is a natural leader. Yue Zhong began to sing praises of Yue Zhong, as he was always careful not to talk bad about his bosses. However, he immediately turned the topic. However, while he might be heroic and valiant, he is not immune to the charm of beautiful women. Furthermore, the type he likes is a huge range, from young girls to cool beauties, as long as they're top beauties and virgins. He likes them all. Yue Zhong had joined Yue Zhong after his forces had defeated the army at Tianmu town. He was quick-witted, and his mouth seemed to be made out of honey. Although he didn't have much of a position amongst Yue Zhong's people, he had already made many friends. He noticed Yue Zhong carrying in Shuang most of the time, with Tenpi Osaka, Yue Tong, Ji Qing Wu, Bai Lu around him. He naturally came to the conclusion. Cha Bai Lai had a strange glint in his eyes while smiling. Since time immemorial, heroes loved beauty. This is surely the truth. Hua Ran himself had a huge harem as well, with over 100 women in it. Yue Zhong also laughed somewhat knowingly, his gaze mischievous. Under Cha Bai Lai's lead, Yue Zhong was smoothly brought right to the heart of the Mongolian stronghold. When he entered the Huangjin clan hall, Yue Zhong immediately saw Hua Ran. Hua Ran had just shot Yue Zhong the cold look, and it was enough to send him kneeling on the ground, preparing to kiss ass. Yue Zhong, envoy of the Han Alliance, came to greet the great Kaghan, wishing the Kaghan many years of good health. Hua Ran watched this man with a lack of backbone, contempt in his eyes, as he spoke coldly. "Did Yue Zhong send you to persuade me? What are his conditions?" Yue Zhong was full of euphemism. "Our great leader Yue Zhong hopes that you can surrender unconditionally and work together to unite the Central Plains. He is willing to ensure the protection of you and your family, such that you will not come to harm." Yue Zhong obviously did not dare to come down strong on Hua Ran like how Yue Zhong threatened. That death will come should he resist. He was afraid that Hua Ran would drag him out to be executed. When two armies fought, the envoys were usually not mistreated. However, Yue Zhong had slaughtered the envoys from Manchuria. This was a wide-known fact. Hua Ran laughed coldly as he barked, "Just protecting my life? And if I don't surrender?" What are his original words? Speak. Yue Zhong trembled, and he forged through. Leader Yue Zhong said, "If the Kaghan doesn't surrender after they breach the Huangjin clan, he will wipe out your entire family line and clans. He's only willing to give you an hour to consider. After an hour, he will charge in." What a ruthless fellow! Hua Ran sighed bitterly. Based on what they knew of Yue Zhong, he was definitely capable of doing what he said. Hua Ran could definitely flee on his own, being a top evolver. However, his wife, kids, friends, and loyal subordinates would not be able to escape their fate. If they fought back, Yue Zhong would not let them off. If they were too strong in their resistance, all the Mongols of the Huangjin clan stronghold might have to suffer from Yue Zhong's wrath. Yue Zhong's troops did not adhere to the 3 rules and 8 notices. Instead, they were a force that focused on victory. Otherwise, he wouldn't have sent Lai Ming out to wreak havoc. I'll go speak to Yue Zhong. Hua Ran came down from his seat and spoke to his 2 generals. If I'm not back within 5 hours, and there's no news, you guys take your own subordinates and flee. Remember to burn all resources before you leave. Before I'm back, watch all the resources. Don't let anyone touch them. Yes. Great Khan. The 2 generals responded loudly. Yue Zhong watched in wonder. He truly is the Mongol king, so decisive and charismatic. To Yue Zhong, the people and resources of the Huangjin clan stronghold were important. Should they be destroyed and the soldiers escape, then it would be a huge blow to Yue Zhong on 2 fronts. He would have to spend a large amount of time and effort to protect the slaves and ensure the flow of resources. This was harder than taking his troops to defeat the Mongolian army. After making his preparations, Hua Ran followed Yue Zhong out of the stronghold and into Yue Zhong's camp. Chapter 655. Hua Ran's Conditions. Chapter 655. Hua Ran's Conditions. Within Yue Zhong's camp, Yue Zhong was hugging Yin Shuang, and beside him stood by Xiao Sheng and Ji Qingwu. Tenpi Osaka was hidden in the shadows. 20 evolvers of above level 40 that had withstood countless battles stood neatly in 2 rows. Under the watchful gazes of all these experts, as well as Yue Zhong, Hua Ran walked in, his countenance calm and not a nary of worry on his handsome face. Yue Zhong spoke. What guts! Truly the Mongol king Hua Ran. You actually dared to walk alone into my camp. Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you right now? If you die, the entire Mongol Empire will crumble, and no faction can stand up to me. The moment Yue Zhong's words landed, all the experts tensed up, their eyes fixed on Hua Ran. Yin Shuang also shot daggers out of her eyes while looking at him, her little fists curled up tightly. Should Yue Zhong give the command, she will immediately rush out to blast his head. Hua Ran looked straight at Yue Zhong, without any intention of cowering nor submitting. When I left, I already gave the order. Once I'm dead, all the resources of the Huangjin clan stronghold would be set ablaze. If you want to take over a broken and useless building, by all means. As a warlord, even when he was pressed to such circumstances, Hua Ran still retained his demeanor and did not grovel to beg for his life. Good. You could be considered a hero. Yue Zhong eyed him, a look of appreciation in his gaze. Many people found it hard to retain their calm under the threat of death. Those who were usually officials were mostly cowards. As the Mongol king, Hua Ran had actually risked his life to enter Yue Zhong's camp by himself. Just this alone caused Yue Zhong to admire him. Yue Zhong continued unoppressively. Hua Ran, I want the entire Huangjin clan to submit. There can only be my voice throughout the Central Plains. State your conditions. As the victor, Yue Zhong had the advantage, and thus, only he could possibly call for the conditions in such a prideful tone. Hua Ran kept his gaze fixed on Yue Zhong, each of his words clear. If I were to submit, how would you deal with me? Give me a glass of poison wine, or let me rot as a commoner. Hua Ran was not just a peak-level evolver, but also the tyrant of the Central Plains once. Whenever a new power managed to conquer their enemies, they would not let such existences continue to live, and thus, they would choose to wipe them out. Yue Zhong stared back. I will not kill you. Instead, I'll transfer your family and you to Vietnam, and you won't be allowed to return to the Central Plains ever again. As long as you stay there obediently, I will let you live your life out as a rich man. As long as you don't take arms against me, I won't kill you. If you dare to try and contest my power again, I will wipe out all of your family lines. How's that? Ran's presence in the Central Plains had been too resounding, and Yue Zhong wasn't willing to let this unstable element stay here. If he didn't kill him, he had to make sure he was far away, with no way to regroup with his old subordinates. Of course, the best method was still to kill him. Ran became silent, and he knew it was the best way. He then replied, "If I want to remain here in the Central Plains, how would you deal with it?" Yue Zhong's eyes flashed coldly. "Then I will choose to kill you right now. Even if chaos erupts in the Huangjin clan stronghold, I will not let you leave here alive." A capable leader could expand his power and authority fast. Ran was too outstanding. Yue Zhong could not allow him to continue his activities on the Central Plains. Otherwise, there will be countless troubles to come. Ran's heart turned cold. He could tell that Yue Zhong was determined from his words. If he insisted on staying on, Yue Zhong would definitely not spare him. His eyes flashed, and he hesitated before saying, "I will bring the Huangjin clan to submit to you and fight for you. How about that? Since there are still many factions out here in the Central Plains, I'm willing to bring the troops to help you persuade them." Oh, Yue Zhong felt incredulous. He had never expected Ran to suggest joining him. He sunk into deep thought. If Ran truly joined Yue Zhong would gain a terrifying strength. The elite troops under Ran were all-powerful and valiant warriors. Be it dealing with humans or zombies, they would be a powerful addition to his current might. This time, Ran's army had lost not because they weren't brave or lacked manpower, they lacked measures against the aerial assault. In modern warfare, losing the flow of the battle to aerial attacks was a terrifying thing, especially out here in the plains, where there was not a single shred of cover to protect against any aerial assault. Ground troops were at a huge disadvantage. If Yue Zhong didn't have the 30 assault helicopters, even if he threw all his forces at the Mongolian army, at best, both sides would have suffered great casualties, but the victor would not have been so clear. Yue Zhong was unsure, because he had little troops on hand right now, and the true elites did not exceed 5,000. It was going to be tough to expect them to exert sufficient pressure on tens of thousands of Mongolian soldiers. Should things go awry, his own troops might even be swallowed. I know you must be thinking that my troops will be hard to control. However, you can rest assured, modern warfare is fought with ample equipment and proper support. A troop without any support could not engage in a long battle. Once I submit and join your ranks, the resources of the Huangjin clan would be in your hands. As long as you hold on to them, we can't possibly rebel. Furthermore, our families and loved ones will be in your grasp as well, and they're the best tool to use against us. If you're worried that there are too many of us, you can split us up and fill the ranks up with other Hans. Or you can disarm a number until you're satisfied. In addition, there are over hundreds of thousands of slaves of various ethnicity groups. Once you set them free, they'll follow you. You can choose people from them to form a matching force to keep us in check. Like that, the total number of Hans will be more than us. Since the Central Plains are vast, there are numerous Han factions out there. I can bring my troops to subjugate them and send them to you. Like this, the battle power of the Hans will only strengthen, and you will have no worry about us betraying you. Ran explained in detail, much to Yue Zhong's surprise. Yue Zhong stared at him. "Why do you want to work for me?" Normally, a leader would rather be a big fish in a small pond than a small fish in a big pond. Even if they were captured, they wouldn't submit so easily like this. Yue Zhong was suspicious of Ran's sudden proposal. There was struggle in Ran's eyes, as he replied, "Before the apocalypse, I had been a rich man's son and led a wastrel's life. There was no goal or aim, and I only sought to enjoy myself. After the apocalypse, I've grown to love this exciting life of battle. There's no way for me to go back to enjoying myself and pleasures. If I don't have power or forced to be idle, I would suffocate to death." There were some who preferred to live peaceful and quiet lives. Some chose to live theirs on the edge. Many officials had lost their lives at the start of the apocalypse because they had lost the authority that came with their positions and could not adjust accordingly. Hua Ran was also not willing to bury himself in a small corner of Vietnam, living a quiet life. Even if he had to die, he wanted to go out with a bang on the battlefields. Yue Zhong looked at Hua Ran for a long while before deciding, "Fine, I'll promise you, as long as you join me, I can let you continue to lead warriors to roam the Central Plains. However, all your subordinates will have to obey my every command. If there's a single instance of you disobeying, then don't blame me for being merciless. How's that? Do you still want to lead?" It was as Hua Ran pointed out. As long as Yue Zhong held the logistics, there was no way for Hua Ran to go. After all, they were an entire force of riders. If they couldn't even eat their fill, how would they win any fights? Much less fight against an armored troop with aerial support. Hua Ran immediately went down on one knee as he announced, "I'm willing to serve leader with my life." He was decisive. Having made the decision to serve Yue Zhong, he was willing to put down his position as the Mongol king and wholeheartedly serve as Yue Zhong's subordinate. Yue Zhong eyed Hua Ran and spoke slowly. "All those who have partaken in the killing and slaughter of the Hans and other races, I will not let any of them off. Do you understand?" Hua Ran's face turned cold. "Yes, leader. I will go grab those bastards for leader and execute them as an example." Yue Zhong then dismissed him. "All right, go back. First, transport the resources out. I'll get my men to receive them." "Yes, leader." Hua Ran then quickly left the room. After Hua Ran left, Bao Xi could not help but ask, "Leader, are you really going to use that guy? He's not simple at all. Too ambitious. If we're not careful, he might turn around to swallow us." Yue Zhong replied, "That's right. He's a double-edged sword. If we can utilize him properly, he can be the sharpest blade in our troops. However, the moment we show any weakness, he will be the first to bite us." Bao Xi was confused. "Then you still promised him?" Yue Zhong's eyes glinted. "We have to quickly amass our strength and take down the capital in a year's time. Otherwise, things will be bad then." Chapter 656, Elder Council. Chapter 656, Elder Council. Since Hua Ran made the decision to join Yue Zhong, he did not throw any curveballs. Instead, he handed everything within the Huangjing clan's stronghold to Yue Zhong obediently. Under his orders, most of the Mongolians put down their weapons. However, there were a few hot-blooded youths that could not accept surrendering without a fight. Some other elites took their own lives. However, many of them heaved a sigh of relief and put down their weapons. After all, what was most precious on earth was still one's own life. Yue Zhong might be vicious, but he never went against his word once he promised. Hua Ran also abided by Yue Zhong's wishes and helped to release the hundred thousands of slaves. The sudden increase of slaves was a huge burden on Yue Zhong's shoulders. He had to process and release them, and could not afford to use too much force. Otherwise, there might be potential dissatisfaction brewing amongst the survivors. Therefore, he had to put in more effort to get it down properly. Inside a tent, Bao Xi looked at the intelligence officer kneeling in front of him in horror and disbelief. "What? The Great Khan surrendered? Is what you said true? It's impossible. Definitely impossible. The Great Khan is a person above persons. How could he surrender to Yue Zhong, that despicable and vicious Han dog?" Hua Ran had established the Mongol Empire by himself, and his position amongst his followers was equivalent to Yue Zhong amongst his men. Within the empire, while there might be some who were not of the same mind as Hua Ran, they were still loyal. Bao Xi was someone who had been saved countless times by Hua Ran and was considered one of his trusted aides. He was loyal, and when he heard the respected Hua Ran of his heart submitting to Yue Zhong, it was like a huge blow to him. At this time, the handsome man in question with a strict aura stepped into the tent and spoke slowly. "Bao Xi, it's true. I've truly submitted to Yue Zhong." Bao Xi's eyes turned bloodshot. His teeth gritted as he kneeled. "Great Khan, Why? We have so many good brothers. Under my lead, there are still 3,000 riders. As long as you give the order, we're willing to follow you throughout the Central Plains. Yue Zhong is a Han, and no matter how strong his is, the Central Plains don't belong to him. The Central Plains belong to us Mongols. Even if we can't take him on in a frontal battle, as long as we make use of our usual tactics, with the vast Central Plains, he can't do anything to else. Great Khan, why? Why did you submit? Why? Yue Ran chuckled bitterly and asked, Bao Xi, how long will the rations in your hands last? Bao Xi turned silent, before replying slowly, we should be able to last another 2 days with the dry rations. If we scrimp a little, it should be enough to last 4 days. If we kill our horses, we can last even longer. Yue Ran replied, his tone full of bitterness. If we lose the Huangjin clan stronghold, we lose our lifeline. Out here in the Central Plains, if we don't provide food backup for our men, we will die from battles and starve to death. Our bullets will be lesser with each round we fire. Without a base, any storm could claim the lives of all our brothers. Our Mongolian brethren are all within the Huangjin clan stronghold. If we continue fighting, Yue Zhong would definitely not go easy on us, and all our people will become slaves, and he might even kill the families of the soldiers. Without Huangjin clan, we won't even have the necessary support to resist him. If we continue to fight, not only us, our families and loved ones will also follow us in death. For their future and sake, we can only choose to submit to him and fight for him. In the apocalypse, without a base to return to, it was extremely dangerous. This was because there were powerful tornadoes and sandstorms that raged on out here in the flat, wide plains, with some even lasting a few days and nights. There was no way for the people to go out and hunt. Other than the powerful storms, there were also all sorts of mutant beasts. Some of them grouped together in numbers and were incredibly savage, causing even someone like Yue Ran to retreat when up against them. If a huge group of humans were forced to be vagrants out here in the Central Plains, they would definitely die when chased by the mutant beasts. When Bao Xi heard Yue Ran's words, he then asked, Great Khan, are you here to persuade me to surrender as well? Yue Ran's eyes flashed with a glint as he looked at Bao Xi and said slowly, That's right. I'm here to advise you to surrender, so that our brothers may have a chance. Great Khan, let me call you that one last time. I know you have your reasons for submitting to Yue Zhong, and I know you're doing it for the future of our brothers. However, I can't bring myself to do it. I will only serve the great Mongolian Empire. Bao Xi kneeled and kowtowed 3 times, causing his forehead to bleed, before he pulled out his curved blade to slash his own neck, shouting, Long live the Mongolian Empire! With a flash of the blade, a long slash appeared on Bao Xi's neck as fresh blood splattered out. Yue Ran watched, his eyes widening, as his lips quivered before he sighed, Go well. Bao Xi was a nationalistic person, and if there was no more hope for the great Mongolian Empire, then he would rather choose to end his own life. Yue Ran turned to leave the tent. Bao Xi's Grey Wolf troops then landed in Yue Ran's hands, and, under his orders, they were transferred to Yue Zhong smoothly. On the other side, the remaining Blood Eagle troops that were under Am were immediately led by him and fled to the outer parts of Mongolia the moment they heard that Yue Ran surrendered to Yue Zhong. The Blood Eagle riders were a sharp blade of the Mongolian Empire and had crushed countless Han factions. Am was also a cruel nationalist who killed countless Hans, and he knew Yue Zhong would not let him go. He didn't want to die, thus he could only flee. The Manchurian Emperor Xianzhen was pretty fast. As Yue Zhong swallowed up the Mongolian Empire, he quickly left together with his remaining troops and slaves, fleeing to the north. Yue Zhong lacked manpower. Swallowing the Mongolian Empire was like gobbling up a huge meal that was way beyond himself. It required a long time to digest this meal. Although he had already scouted the direction of the Manchurian Empire, he had no way of making any move currently. Yue Ran had submitted to Yue Zhong and was extremely cooperative. However, Yue Zhong could not help but be on guard against him. At the same time, there would be remnant soldiers from the Grey Wolves troops and Blood Eagle troops, causing the total number of soldiers to exceed 10,000. Yue Zhong had only 3,000 soldiers within the Huangjin clan, who were required to supervise the 10,000-strong Mongolian troops, as well as maintaining the peace and calm of the hundreds of thousands of survivors. They also had to be on guard against the other sneak attacks from other factions and mutant beast hordes, so it was extremely taxing on the soldiers. They had absolutely no resources to chase the Manchurian troops. Within a room in Europe, with plenty of advanced communications equipment, one particular male received a phone call, and his face turned pale as he left the room in huge strides. Within a meeting room, a number of agitated voices were engaging in discussion. The Mongolians' Central Plains has been unified. Our first cavalry on the Central Plains have been wiped out by a person called Yue Zhong person as well. Most of the Chinese have already been gathered in his hands, Guangxi, and Hunan, as well as Central Plains. The number of people under him has already reached 2 million. If this powerful entity were to rise in Asia, it will not benefit us. We should quickly wipe him out. No, I feel that we shouldn't waste too much energy on Asia. Africa and Middle East are the important territories. We can gain a whole lot more people from Africa, as well as resources from the Middle East. Asia is too far from us, and not only do we face problems deploying troops there, even if we could take down the faction there, it will be hard to move the resources back to our place. In the meeting hall, there were a few men in military clothing, the elders of the Kingdom of God. Every word and action of theirs could set things in motion. The Kingdom of God had already amassed enough influence all over the world, even before the apocalypse. Of course, there were still fights with other factions. However, with their strong technological advancement, they won more than lost. The Thunder Fighters were an invention of the Kingdom of God. It was because of them that Yue Zhong had managed to gain the upper hand in a few of his battles. He only had less than 50 of those mechanical beasts, and they were already so tyrannical. The Kingdom of God could actually manufacture about 20 a month. The gap in power was huge. One particular hook-nosed man with good looks, erect, spoke solemnly. Apostle. I recommend sending the apostles to deal with Yue Zhong. The number of Chinese in China is huge. If he successfully unites the country, then this backward country could possibly overtake us. It will not be beneficial to our plans. Even if Asia is not within our consideration, nor a place of interest, we cannot allow someone strong to appear there. At the very least, not while we're still expanding our operations. Based on the reports, Yue Zhong is wildly ambitious, and he has gone on a number of conquests. If he were to become the leader of China, it will be dangerous for us. I recommend that we send 2 apostles to assist the Mongolian troops in eliminating Yue Zhong. Chapter 657, Undercurrent. Chapter 657, Undercurrent. Another man frowned. Apostle? Is there a need to send one? The apostles were the strongest experts of the Kingdom of God, and were the peak evolvers of the Europe continent. Each of the 12 had terrifying abilities. They could suppress an entire region by themselves. As the powerful trump cards of the Kingdom of God, they have been crushing the enemies of the Kingdom of God. Because of them, the Kingdom of God had been able to expand swiftly and smoothly. Of course, the Kingdom of God would prioritize the most advanced weapons and all sorts of precious medicines or manufactured serums from the various mutant plants and gave them to the apostles. At the same time, powerful skill books, survivor coins were all given to them as well. Both sides worked together to ensure a beneficial working relationship. Erect spoke solemnly. It's necessary. Based on the reports, this Yue Zhong has the strength of an apostle as well. In order to wipe him out completely, we will need at least 2 apostles as well as 8 divine envoys. One of the elders asked, our apostles are all in America, Africa, Middle East, Britain, and India engaged in battle. The remaining 4 are on guard duty. If we had to deal with Yue Zhong, we would have to relocate those who are on the battlefield. Where do you propose taking them from? The kingdom of God was extending its reach everywhere, at the same time engaging in battles on all fronts. As the strongest experts of the kingdom of God, the apostles were naturally deployed to strategic places to be at the forefront. One particular wrinkly old man with a head full of white hair stammered out, "Let the 9th apostle Harriman and 12th apostle Lena go and deal with Yue Zhong. We cannot allow a strong contender appear in China. It will truly be bad for us." "Yes, great elder." The moment that old man spoke, the rest of the elders followed his wishes. This old man was one of the 3 greatest elders, Jonas. This seemingly harmless old man had machinated many of the dealings and directions the kingdom of God took, and his methods were cruel and vicious. Anybody who stood against him was basically dead, and the moment he made a decision, few dared to go against him. With Jonas' orders, a huge undercurrent was making its way for Yue Zhong. On the Central Plains, Bao Xi City came up to Yue Zhong with bloodshot eyes, reporting snappily, "Leader, the brothers we sent to Changming County have been killed." "What? They dare to kill our men?" Yue Zhong's face turned ugly. When 2 armies fought, they seldom killed envoys. After all, it was a huge insult to the other party. Yue Zhong seldom killed envoys, unless it was necessary, like the case of the Manchurian envoy, in order to shake the rest of the Hans and get them to rally against the Manchurian Empire. Now his own envoy had been killed, he was furious. Bao Xi City's eyes flashed with a wild ferocity. "Leader, let me take men to go and wipe them out. I will tear their skin and rip their tendons." Yue Zhong turned to Hue Ran and said, "Hue Ran, you go grab 3,000 gray wolf riders and come with me." Hue Ran saluted and responded, "Yes, leader." Yue Zhong brought Bai Lu and the Tran army, together with Hue Ran and his 3,000 gray wolf riders, as they made for Changming County. Changming County was a small place that had built up a 6M wall all around it. There were multiple machine guns placed on top of the walls, ready to defend itself. All sorts of wires and traps had been set up around the wall, over a wide piece of barren land that had obviously been cleared, creating an open field. When Yue Zhong arrived, he saw a corpse that had its ears, nose, and hands sliced off, while its chest was stuck to the wall with multiple stakes. He saw the corpse, and his heart was instantly filled with fury, his face turning ugly. This was the envoy that he had sent to Changming County. Hue Ran came to Yue Zhong and spoke lowly. The leader of this place is called Huyin Xiong'er, and he is a peak-level Han expert. There are a total of 10,000 survivors within and 1,000 soldiers. There is Tiger Leopard Riders. Each of them are enhancers of at least level 10 and above. Their strength is not weak. The killing intent in Yue Zhong's eyes flashed as he ordered, "I want the heads of Huyin Xiong'er and his men. Go get them for me." A strange glint appeared in Hue Ran's eyes. "Yes, leader, your subordinate obeys." Hue Ran knew it was a time for him to shine. If his performance was subpar, then Yue Zhong would definitely send him away to live his days out peacefully. "Come with me." Hue Ran summoned 40 experts that had been part of the Jie Shui army as they made their way closer towards Changming County. The soldiers of Changming County quickly discovered Hue Ran and his men and began to fire. One of the experts beside Hue Ran then conjured up a psi barrier, blocking the bullets from landing. Another summoned out a huge bear of 3M, which braved the bullets and charged for the entrance. Honk! Honk! Following some loud explosions, the huge bear was enveloped by the powerful landmines buried, blasting one of its leg off. It still continued its ferocious charge, setting off all the landmines before it disappeared fully. Hue Ran came to the entrance and cast his abilities, his blood dough chi covering his frame. With a loud roar, he kicked off the ground, immediately leaping up 6M, his silver curved blade slashing out and killing 3 soldiers on top. Another 6 agility-based enhancers also leaped up beside Hue Ran, their own blades flashing out as they slaughtered the defending soldiers of Changming County. At this time, Huyin Xiong'er, who was a huge man with a broad back and thick frame, appeared together with some experts, his face full of disbelief as he asked, "Who ran? How come it's you? Weren't you fighting with Yue Zhong? I thought our aim was the same. How come you're here attacking?" Huyin Xiong'er had killed Yue Zhong's envoy, thinking that Hu Ran was still fighting with him. Chapter 658, Dog Hu Ran. Chapter 658, Dog Hu Ran. Hu Ran had a cold look, and he shot towards Huyin Xiong'er, a flash of his blade as it slashed out. All the soldiers that stood between them were instantly sliced in half. Hu Ran, don't tell me you have become Yue Zhong's dog? Huyin Xiong'er sneered as his face fell. The mighty Mongol king had actually been degraded to a Han's dog. If your ancestor Genghis Khan were to know, he would crawl out from his grave to teach you a lesson. Facing the sarcasm of Huyin Xiong'er, Hu Ran's icy killing intent turned stronger, and he immediately appeared beside the guards of Huyin Xiong'er with a boom, slashing down at the level 50 enhancer. Shock was written all over the face of the level 50 enhancer as he brought his arms and a cleaver up to defend himself. Hu Ran's blood do qi intensified, and his body constitution was enhanced further. The silver curved blade came slashing down and slashed through the cleaver before continuing through his body, slicing him into two. Huyin Xiong'er could not help but exclaim in shock, "Zhang He." Zhang He was the strongest expert by Huyin Xiong'er's side, and such an expert was actually killed in a single strike by Hu Ran, causing all of the soldiers present to fully understand the might of this Mongolian king. Hu Ran had burst forth with a powerful strength, and he continued the onslaught, killing the rest of the enhancers around Huyin Xiong'er. Pung! Pung! An enhancer with a firearms manipulation specialization skill began to fire at Hu Ran. His accuracy was incredible, and a number of bullets actually struck Hu Ran, only to bounce off due to the defense of his Type 3 mutant beast hide. Huyin Xiong'er's face turned pale as he shouted, "Kill him! All of you charge. He's alone. As long as we kill him, I'll allow you guys to enjoy yourselves with the women in the leper garden. I will allow you guys to even choose 10 women each." When they heard it, the enhancers immediately became excited and charged towards Hu Ran. The women in the leper garden were beautiful women that Huyin Xiong'er had collected from everywhere. It was not usually accessible, and only those who had contributed to Huyin Xiong'er's cause were allowed in once or twice. Hearing that he would open it to them, they became incredibly motivated. There were 40 enhancers by Huyin Xiong'er's side, and they were at least level 30 and above. Each of them possessed different skills, and were the core fighting strength of Huyin Xiong'er's force. There were 2 evolvers among them as well. Being surrounded by so many experts, even a high-level evolver might die. Facing the assault of these many experts, there were some even muttering their chants for their curses and magic spells. Hu Ran's eyes turned red, and he immediately unleashed his lion's roar. He took a deep breath and roared out loud, as a powerful shockwave blasted out with him in the center. In an instant, the numerous agility and strength-based enhancers were forced to their knees. The spirit-based enhancers crumpled, their eardrums shattered as blood flowed. Their brains had suffered a massive concussion, and many began to convulse. Only some who had a body constitution 10 times stronger than ordinary people stood their ground, their complexions pale, with shock in their eyes. With a single roar, Hu Ran had incapacitated so many of his enemies. His own face also flushed, as his gaze turned savage, and he charged towards Huyin Xiong'er. Huyin Xiong'er watched in horror and regret as Hu Ran came closer, and tried to retreat as he shouted, "Hu Ran, don't kill me. I'm willing to join hands with you and fight Yue Zhong together. That's right. The leopard garden, all the women, they're all yours. Please spare my dog life." Huyin Xiong'er was also a strength-based evolver whose level had reached 56. The moment he saw the numerous experts he had painstakingly gathered falling at Hu Ran's hands, He had lost his fighting will instantly. Those who had remained standing had long since fled. No matter how beautiful the women that were promised, one had to be alive to enjoy such pleasures. These men weren't willing to sacrifice themselves. No need. Give me your head. Hua Ran's eyes flashed with a ferocious glint as he brought his blade down towards Hu Yinshiong. No! His eyes flashed with regret and unwillingness before his entire body was split in two. Hua Ran then grabbed his head and ran to the top of the wall, roaring, Hu Yinshiong is dead. His head is here. Those who surrender will be spared. Hu Yinshiong is dead. Those who surrender will be spared. Those who surrender will be spared. The sounds reverberated from the city wall, causing every militant to look up. The moment they saw the decapitated head of Hu Yinshiong, many began to flee, with some instantly throwing their weapons down and surrendering. Hu Yinshiong's governance wasn't the best within these city walls. With his death, there weren't many who were willing to continue fighting for him. Leader, this is Hu Yinshiong's head. Hua Ran brought the head and presented it to Yue Zhong respectfully. Yue Zhong eyed the head and responded coolly, throw into the corpse vehicle. Since Bai Lu's Mother 3 required a large amount of corpses and bodies to regrow, Yue Zhong had collected the bodies of the enemies he killed, together with the zombies, and threw them for the tree to absorb and grow. Hua Ran looked at the hundreds of soldiers that were rounded up, and his eyes flashed. Leader, these are all Hu Yinshiong's men. They had surrendered. Do we still kill them? The gazes of the soldiers all fell on Yue Zhong, awaiting his judgment fearfully. Yue Zhong turned to them and ordered coldly, those who took part in the killing of my envoy will be executed. The rest will be sent to the scum battalion. Ordinarily, Yue Zhong was easy on those who surrendered. However, this particular group had dared kill his envoy, and it was an insult to him. If he didn't punish them heavily, the rest of the factions out in the Central Plains would try the same thing. No, leader, I was forced. I've already surrendered. You can't kill me. Please. One enhancer immediately stood up and screamed in fear. Yue Zhong frowned, waving his hands as the stinger appeared. There was a flash of a muzzle, and the enhancer's head was blasted apart, with red and white matter splattering all over the ground. Seeing Yue Zhong taking out that enhancer with no hesitation, the expressions of the rest of the militants fell. 7 of them immediately activated their transformation skills, but just as they did so, they were instantly riddled with bullets all around. Yue Zhong eyed the rest of the militants coolly, his killing intent billowing out. Resistance will be met with death. Despair was written all over the faces of the rest of the militants, as they watched their comrades slaughtered helplessly. No one dared to move. Hua Ran saw Yue Zhong killing 8 of them in total, and his brows furrowed slightly, but he did not do anything and stood obediently by one side. As the men who took part in the killing of Yue Zhong's envoy were dragged out and executed one by one, the gory scene struck fear in the rest of their hearts. There were over 10,000 survivors in this encampment. However, because of Hu Yinshiong's tyrannical rule, most of them were emaciated and could not march for long. Yue Zhong had no choice but to deploy a battalion of soldiers to set up camp and defend here. The news of Hu Yinshiong being slaughtered, as well as Hua Ran selling himself to Yue Zhong, soon spread throughout the Central Plains. The rest of the factions heard it, and their hearts turned cold. They were living it up in their own bases, and weren't willing to surrender to Yue Zhong to be ordered around. However, many more began to take the initiative in surrendering. With a single order, most of the factions did not dare resist. Otherwise, he would instantly deploy troops to meet them head-on, killing any leader who resisted, and throwing the soldiers into the scum battalion as cannon fodder. The Mongol king Hua Ran, blood slaughter Li Ming, victorious troops Li Guang. The 3 of them led their own forces heading to the various factions that did not want to submit, wiping out the command and taking over the survivors and resources. Under this new regime, those who weren't willing to submit had no choice but to flee further northeast. There were greater numbers there as it was closer to the cities, but at the same time, the danger of the zombies was greater. Yue Zhong's forces had no way of contending with those parts. Chapter 659, Reorganizing Troops. Chapter 659, Reorganizing Troops. With the efforts of Hue Ran, Lai Ming, Yi, and Li Guang, many survivors were soon drafted into Yue Zhong's faction. Adding the various races from the Huangjin clan, the total number of survivors under him soon swelled to 600,000. Yue Zhong then arranged for a number of officials that had already gone through training at Guangxi and Hunan to come over and establish a government. It marked the beginning of a proper development, and he did not rush the advance towards the city, instead choosing to re-establish stability and some semblance of society. After all, there were already over 20 million zombies out here in the Central Plains. The capital was sure to exceed that number. Furthermore, population was denser in the cities. It was going to be incredibly tough to charge in. The troops under Hue Ran, Lai Ming, Yi, and Li Guang did not exceed 30,000. If a force of such size were to engage 20 million zombies without guns and cannons, it was basically impossible. After conquering a number of small counties, Yue Zhong then deployed over some military architects to begin development into military factories. After obtaining the evolving temple, Yue Zhong had begun to understand the importance and might of it. The strongest benefit was the ability of churning out various talents now. Of course, most of them were at most equivalent to ordinary engineers from before the apocalypse and did not possess high talents nor capabilities in the field. However, it wasn't a problem manufacturing ammunition and production lines. The reason behind the quick rise of the Kingdom of God was due to their natural talents. Other than Europe possessing the most advanced technological research institutes, they were the first to obtain a novice village. Many survivors joined the different factories and production lines, and Yue Zhong distributed amounts of food as wage, greatly boosting the survivability of the people in the Central Plains. Every day, the strength of Yue Zhong's faction was slowly rising and expanding. With the stabilizing of the survivors, Yue Zhong thus called back the 3 troops to begin a reorganization of his troops. Slaughterer Lai Ming, he had gained a role that he always wanted, a brigadier general in charge of over 3,000 riders. Li Guang became the regiment commander of the Central Plains 1st Regiment, with the victorious troops as the core troops. Sidu Jin was thus drafted as the brigade commander of the Logistics Brigade, sending support whenever required. The 3rd Brigade was the Grey Wolf Riders under Hue Ran. They also only had 3,000 and were made up of the Grey Wolf Riders. The vice commander was Yue Zhong, who was a coward and slightly despicable. However, his natural affinity with people made him an important person to talk to the various Mongolian leaders. In addition to his past merits, Yue Zhong had thus conferred upon him that role. After the reorganization, the number of soldiers under Hue Ran was reduced to 3,000, and these men were all using cleavers and other melee weapons. Only 500 of them had some 81 rifles, Type 56, as well as ancient firearms. The ammunition was also limited to about 5,000 of them. There were no other heavy firearms. Under such circumstances, if they were to revolt, there would only be death. When Hue Ran took over the reorganized troops and weapons, he chuckled bitterly and was speechless. He knew clearly that Yue Zhong was using him, at the same time guarding himself. He dared not say anything, because he knew that should he make any strange movements, Yue Zhong would immediately clamp down on him and his troops. Once all that was down, the over 10,000 elite Mongolian riders were separated. Yue Zhong wasn't willing to send them to the factories to work, and after consideration, he decided to set up a reinforcement troops handled by Bao Xi. Bao Xi had followed Yue Zhong for a long time and knew his style. He was just inherently lazy and unwilling to lead. However, he was more than equipped to train this troop. Under Yue Zhong's instructions, he could only carry out his task bitterly as the brigade commander of the 2nd Support Troops, a position which many coveted. Outside of Chimu town, 8 soldiers wielding guns stood at a secretive location. An armored vehicle drew close and came to a stop. The doors opened, and Yue Zhong and Yin Shuang stepped out. "Leader!" The 8 soldiers immediately saluted, their gazes filled with respect. This man had led them to many victories in the Central Plain and expanded their control. It was truly an undefeatable force. This caused them to feel respect for this man. Yue Zhong nodded slightly and stepped into the garden. Inside the garden, there were many sentries located everywhere, with multiple heavy machine guns set up. At the same time, under the shade of some dense foliage, there were a few machine gun-mounted vehicles and anti-air defense vehicles. Yue Zhong had obtained plenty of military equipment after the Ulan Mountain expedition, and this was one of his trump cards. There were plenty of land-to-air missile launchers. Even if thunder fighters were to come, he would give the enemy some degree of pain. At the deepest part of the garden, there was a tall, towering tree growing. All around the tree, man-eating mutant flowers and vines grew everywhere. This was the mutant mother tree that he had brought out of Ulan mountain range. However, compared to the huge tree he saw that time, this was still far from it. The mutant flora ecosystem of the apocalypse was vastly different from the past. As long as there was enough nutrients, they could swell up quickly. Initially, the mother tree only had its core heart, but after the nourishment of countless corpses and zombies brought by Yue Zhong, it had swiftly grown. On one of the branches, Bai Lu sat with her feet dangling, eyeing the tree with a huge smile. Yue Zhong looked at her and called out, "Come on down, Bai Lu." Although Yue Zhong had given his word and moved the mutant tree out here, he had prepared plenty of safeguards, burying countless explosives all around. The moment the tree had any strange ideas, he could remotely detonate the explosives, blowing the tree up. Bai Lu came down with a warm smile. "Yes, Master." Yue Zhong asked, "How long till the mother tree can start producing more trants?" Bai Lu replied, "It can start producing them already. However, to produce high-level ones, it will still require much more fertilizer. The trants it may produce now won't be too strong, at most about level 20 or so, and a maximum of 1,000 of them." Yue Zhong frowned and asked, "Fertilizer? Will corpses work?" Bai Lu replied, "Yes. The higher the level, the stronger the effect." Yue Zhong then continued, "If that's the case, immediately get the mother tree to produce 1,000 trants first. I'm in need of them." "Yes." Bai Lu then shut her eyes as a green radiance shone out of her, enveloping the mother tree. The mother tree shuddered slightly, and countless fruits began to drop onto the ground as low-level trants climbed out of the shapes, their strength about level 20. Yue Zhong eyed these trants and smiled. With these trants as cannon fodder, his human soldiers would suffer less casualties. Not long after, under Yue Zhong's orders, Huer ran. Lai Ming, Yi, and Li Guang led 3,000 riders and shot for a small city that had 70,000 zombies. Lai Ming, Yi roared out to drum up morale. "Attack! Attack! Our riders are the sharpest blades that our leader has trained. We are invincible, and we must conquer the city without fail. Attack! Attack!" The soldiers under Lai Ming, Yi responded with equally passionate yells. This was the first battle they were taking part in after forming this brigade, and as long as they gained enough merit, they would be upgraded to a regiment. On the other side, Li Guang also rose the morale of his troops. "Brothers, our first regiment is the strongest weapon of our leader. We are the strongest. This battle, we must let the rest witness our strength. We can't lose to the 3rd Brigade. Our first regiment must win. Win! Win!" The excited roars resounded throughout the area. This victorious troops were the most elite soldiers before the reorganization and had defeated countless Manchurian and Mongolian soldiers. They had reached a peak and were unafraid of death, nor was defeat on their mind. Huer Ran turned to his soldiers and hollered, "This is the chance for us to gain merit. Our Mongolian men are all heroes. Let them see. Even if we have a disadvantage in equipment, we're still stronger." Right at this time, Yue Zhong chipped in with a smile. That's right. Our 3rd Regiment will definitely gain a stronger foothold with the leadership of our commander. Commander, long live! Everyone shout with me. Glorious Commander, long live! Commander, long live! Commander, long live! The soldiers exchanged looks in the end, joining in the roars as Hua Ran looked on helplessly. Chapter 660. The Strange Movement of 4 Million Zombies. Chapter 660. The Strange Movement of 4 Million Zombies. Under the lead of the 3 leaders, the 3 units charged forth with a total of 16,000 soldiers as they joined forces to assault the city. With such coordination, the small city was soon conquered and the 70,000 zombies were quickly wiped out. The soldiers even discovered 200 emaciated survivors hiding out at different corners of the city. When humans were forced to the edge, they could show incredible tenacity. These people were actually able to survive under the harshest of conditions. After resting, the 3 units continued to launch attacks on the other surrounding counties. Yue Zhong had only deployed the 3 units for the sake of training the troops. As they continued to kill the zombies, they were forged through the flames of battle and grew in experience. With each battle, they became more confident and cleared out more counties. The relentless assaults continued on, and as each county was conquered, they uncovered plenty of resources and rescued many survivors. Other than them, Yue Zhong even sent out Tenpyo Saka, Yin Shuang, Zhuye Tong, and Bai Lu as they led the Tran army to attack other territories. Ji Qing Wu had led 8 youth guards as well as the reinforcement troops to gain levels in the various towns and counties. Yue Zhong intended to raise up a large number of enhancers, and thus he could only delegate Ji Qing Wu to go help a bunch of ordinary soldiers become enhancers. With her supervision, there were a huge number of enhancers of about level 10 being churned out every day. These were then deployed to the battlefield to join the other troops. After all, the soldiers under Li Ming, Hua Ran, and Li Guang were also human and would feel tired. They needed to rest. As for the Tran army, it was different, and they continued to smash through city after city and leaving instantly. The corpses were then transported back to nourish the mother tree and the wheat plant. When the wheat trees consumed enough zombies, they could produce large amount of rice, whereas the mother tree could churn out countless low-level Trans to send to the battlefield. Every day, Yue Zhong's faction was growing stronger out here in the Central Plains. When he called for the assault on the zombies, Yue Zhong had stayed put in the central base and not roam about. Without him, it was hard to direct the various aspects of his plans. Should things turn awry, only Yue Zhong himself could quell the situation. If he were to disappear, then the large-scale attacks on the towns and cities would have to stop. On this day, one officer came up to Yue Zhong with a grave expression, reporting, "Leader, Bao Xi City's zombies had started moving. The 2 million of them had left the city and is marching towards Bayan City. The zombies there have also acted strangely, leaving their own and marching towards Bao Xi City." What? It seems that the 2 groups are converging? Yue Zhong's face fell, and he quickly made for the command center. Yue Zhong quickly came to the command post and pulled up the image. He had obtained quite a number of observatory equipment as well as unmanned reconnaissance drones. Through the pictures, Yue Zhong could ascertain that the 2 groups of zombies were marching toward a single location. His expression turned incredibly ugly. When a number of zombies reached above 1 million, it will be a sizable force. If these 2 groups of 2 million zombies were to converge, even the Kingdom of God would have a hard time dealing with them. Yue Zhong watched the moving zombies with furrowed brows and gave the order, "Convey my command. Get the 1st Regiment, 2nd Rider Brigade, 3rd Brigade to all retreat. Have the 1st and 2nd Support Brigade prepared for battle. All resting activities are to be put on hold." From now on, martial law is in effect, and all factories are to extend their hours from 10 hours to 12. Under the many orders, the troops of the Central Plains began to move. The three main forces turned back from their areas and began to converge at Muyuan County, which was the first line of defense. About 100,000 survivors were deployed to the town to prepare fortifications and defensive constructs, while resources were transported to the front lines. The unmanned drones were also deployed out to keep watch over the two groups of zombies. Yue Zhong watched the vast sea of zombies and muttered, "If only they could fight each other." The two masses of zombies were too fearsome. The 4 million number alone was enough to fill anyone with despair. Even army forces from before the apocalypse would feel a headache when dealing with 4 million freaks. After marching for 2 days, the zombies finally converged. The two groups did not engage in a clash as Yue Zhong had hoped for, instead coming to a silent stop. "What's going on?" Yue Zhong watched with his frown deepening as a bad feeling arose. At one particular corner, where the drones could not capture, a tentacle with a huge head with sharp teeth slithered and opened its huge jaws as it burrowed into the body of his Z2. With a huge breath, it began to suck, turning the Z2 into a dried corpse. After that, the strange zombie continued to pierce another two Z2s and absorb their body fluids. It then let out a satisfied howl. Hearing that howl, the various Z2s and Z1s trembled and returned to the zombie horde. The strange, snake-like zombie with a huge head blinked, its eyes flashing with a human-like intelligence. It seemed to ponder for a while before burrowing into the chest of a large L4. Soon after, the 4 million zombies began to move towards the direction of Bao Xi City. Yue Zhong watched, and his expression turned bad. "Not good. They didn't fight. Convey my orders. Get the 1st Regiment, 2nd Brigade, and 3rd Brigade to fire at will. Use whatever necessary to whittle away at their numbers." Chapter 661, Snipe. Chapter 661, Snipe. The moment Yue Zhong gave the order, all three troops rushed for the front lines. "So many zombies!" Ming rode a black-scaled stallion, leading his 3,000 men, quickly locating the zombies. He watched them swarm, and his face turned pale. 1 million of them was already a sight to behold. Seeing the 4 million zombies felt as though they were facing a sea, and there was nothing that could stop them. It didn't matter how strong a person was, charging headlong into this horde was equivalent to suicide. Facing such a huge zombie horde, accurate soldiers were more efficient than a single enhancer. Ming surveyed the horde before pointing and giving an order, "Charge!" The 3,000 soldiers swiftly readied their guns and began firing. The dense rain of bullets enveloped a large patch of zombies, causing them to fall. However, the swarm of zombies immediately turned to face them, making their way to surround them. "Retreat!" After a few rounds, Ming waved his hands and called for his troops to retreat quickly. After retreating a certain distance, the 2nd Brigade quickly pulled away from the zombies with their superior speed. They then turned around to continue firing, killing huge patches of zombies. Ming Yi's 2nd Brigade was filled with 300 enhancers that had changed their jobs to become soldiers, and they were specially trained to reach level 30, with their gun manipulation skills at level 3. Even on horseback, they could achieve headshots. Under his hit-and-run tactic, Ming and his men quickly disposed of a huge number of zombies, without suffering a single casualty. On the other side, the 1st Regiment charged forth with its armored battalion, brining 20 tanks, 20 IFVs, 60 machine gun-mounted vehicles, and fired wildly at the zombie horde. The dense rain of heavy fire fell upon the zombies, blasting many of them into pieces. Of course, it came at a price. That was the quick expenditure of ammunition. In front of the large zombie horde, the armor battalion had no choice but to retreat when the zombies got close as well. After all, there were Devourers L3S and L4S. The moment the tanks charged right into the horde, those terrifying evolved zombies could demolish them. Every single tank and armor vehicle was a powerful weapon against the zombies, and naturally could not be destroyed. Yue Zhong's current production was not enough to support any manufacturing of tanks or armored vehicles. What a large zombie horde! Hua Ran had also reached the front lines with his 3,000 gray wolf riders, his expression similarly ugly when he caught sight of the zombies. He turned around and saw his soldiers, each of them holding a rifle, and heaved a sigh of relief. If they didn't have guns, his 3,000 men would definitely be swallowed up if they charged at them. The 4 million number was a terrifying figure. Yue Zhong had to utilize every single thing on hand. He could not afford to care about Hua Ran's craftiness and decided to arm them. However, the 1st Regiment and 2nd Brigade were equipped with the more advanced stuff, while the 3rd Brigade was equipped with the older weapons. Although they had all been equipped with weapons, there were too many types from different places, and they had no choice but to try and use them. Lien Zhong looked at the zombie horde, his face pale. Let's just try our best, then we should quickly scatter. The sight of those zombies truly spooked him. He was a coward, and he couldn't muster his will to fight. Hua Ran's eyes flashed as he spoke solemnly. No way. This battle concerns the future of my 3rd Brigade. We have to do our best. He knew that Yue Zhong had kept him because he had use for him. The moment he showed that his value had decreased, he would be sent far away, never to return to the Central Plains. This 3rd Brigade that was made up almost of all Mongolians would be scattered and reorganized as well. By now, the entire Central Plains was already in Yue Zhong's hands. Hua Ran had no way of revolting. A single order from Yue Zhong could put him to death, unless he was willing to abandon all his subordinates, family, and loved ones to flee. Hua Ran glanced at his men, raising his silver curved blade high and roared. 3rd Brigade, aim for victory! 3rd Brigade, aim for victory! 3rd Brigade, aim for victory! When the soldiers saw Hua Ran roaring so passionately, their hearts were filled with valor and loyalty to him. These were all his elite soldiers. 3rd Brigade, forwards! Attack! Hua Ran pointed his curved blade at the zombies and roared. Under his lead, the 3,000 riders charged for the zombies. They were like an arrow that reached about 100 m away from the zombies quickly, pulling out their weapons and firing at the zombies. As the bullets and arrows fell, many of the zombies were killed, and they were trampled by the others behind. As the zombies pushed closer, Hua Ran's men then quickly pulled back and retreated a distance before continuing once more. The 3 units continued to whittle away at the huge zombie horde, culling a large number of them every second. However, the rate was almost negligible, as the horde still continued towards their target. Within one of the L4s inside the horde, the huge mutant tentacle-like zombie watched coldly as the rest of the zombies were slaughtered one by one. Within the horde, a number of devourers were gobbling up those zombies that had been taken out by Yue Zhong's units. A horde that was 4 million strong was simply too terrifying. After fighting for 4 days, the 3 units were able to chip away at their numbers, killing 600,000 of them, but they had to retreat to rest. After all, there was a limit to how much humans could do. Fighting long battles would wear them out. The zombie horde might have lost 600,000 of their numbers, but their speed wasn't impeded in the slightest as they entered Bao Xi City. Soon, they entered the city and began to continue towards the direction of Yue City. Are they intending to converge with the zombies there? Yue Zhong used the unmanned drones to watch the movement, growing suspicious. Yue City was a large place in the Central Plains and had over 2 million population in the past. If the 3 million zombies were to meet those, the total number would swell to hit almost 6 million. Yue Zhong had sent out his 3 units, expending energy and ammunition over the span of 4 days, managing to kill about 600,000 of them. Most of them were ordinary zombies. Once the remaining met those in Yue City, their numbers would truly be undefeatable. No, I can't let those 2 groups meet. Yue Zhong's eyes flashed with a resoluteness, and quickly gave a flurry of orders. As he gave his orders, the 1st Regiment in Muyuan County deployed their motorized infantry unit to launch an attack at the 3 million of them. The Mongolian troops were also quickly equipped with even more weapons, as they relied on their riding skills to take on the zombies. As the battle became even more intense, more zombies were being killed. From time to time, some of the zombies would retaliate, and the evolved zombies amongst them would manage to kill some soldiers. Yue Zhong even sent out a huge force of snipers to snipe them, but the horde continued on its slow march. Ningyu Gorge was an important channel located on the way towards Yue City. Yue Zhong had already deployed the infantry brigade of the 1st Regiment as well as Hue Ran's 3rd Brigade to take up their stand here. After utilizing so many means and killing such a large number of zombies, they had not done anything that could slow the march of the horde. Ningyu Gorge was too important a channel. The moment they got past, the zombies in the nearby cities would join up and fill up their ranks. Yue Zhong was clear that his troops might be able to kill 1,000,000 zombies with their powerful firepower, but these were ordinary zombies. The true elites within the horde had not been dealt with yet. He wasn't willing to see the 3 million of them joining with the 2 million in Yue City. Yue Zhong's troops had no way of retreating now. The moment they abandoned the Ningyu Gorge, the 3 million zombies would quickly converge with the other 2 million. His troops had already expended so much effort to wipe out 1,000,000, and it would go all to waste. Beyond Ningyu Gorge, the 30,000 survivors were currently setting traps and preparing trenches all around the gorge. From afar, it looked like many ants were scurrying about. "They're here!" Li Guang stood at a vantage point, watching the distance with a cold look. At a distance, the ant-like zombies continued to move, and with the passing of time, their numbers grew over the horizon, appearing in the sights of the survivors. Seeing the approaching lifeless corpses with blank eyes and hole-riddled bodies, with a heavy stench, the survivors felt their skin crawl and started to panic. Chapter 662, Zombie with Art of War. Chapter 662, Zombie with Art of War. Zombies were terrifying with their high infection rate and a virus with no cure. Survivors who had not experienced fighting with them would feel the crippling fear and did not dare face them. "Let the workers retreat." Li Guang waved his hands and ordered. With that, the 30,000 survivors quickly made their way back. The vast sea of zombies continued to shamble forwards. In a short while, they got closer to Ningyu Gorge. The many traps and structures laid by the survivors began to exhibit their usefulness. As the zombies continued to march on, all of a sudden, there was a split of the ground as a trench of about 3 m deep and 20 m wide appeared. Many zombies fell into it, and the zombies behind them followed after, trampling those beneath into meat paste. The zombies had no intelligence. Just a simple trap like this was extremely effective. The survivors had prepared this huge pit, which could easily take care of at least thousands of zombies, which would be trampled upon by the zombies behind. Yue Zhong had used such measures in the past plenty of times, and it had become a powerful tool to utilize. Many of the zombies continued to fall into the huge trench. The 30,000 survivors had spent 6 days on this after all, and the total number of trenches and pits they had dug were over 1,000. The sea of zombies had yet to reach the soldiers at Ningyu Gorge, and already, over 300,000 of them had been lost to the various trenches and ditches. However, these holes were also gradually filled up. With the corpses of the zombies filling the holes, the rest of the horde continued on their slow march. After passing through those trenches, the horde came to a number of cement walls of about 1.5 m high. When these ordinary zombies came to these walls, they could not proceed. After all, ordinary zombies did not possess the power to pummel through cement. They could only claw at the walls helplessly. The zombies behind continued to push forward, and it resulted in a whole load of them squashed together. Honk, honk, honk. At this time, a number of cannon fire blasted the dense horde of zombies, each volley killing at least dozens of zombies. The soldiers of Ningyu Gorge at the front lines had also raised their weapons and were firing at the zombies, shooting down the zombies that had come to a stop in front of those walls. The soldiers that had not undergone the job change as soldiers were also firing with all their might, although their efficiency was lesser, only killing about 60% or 70% of time. The cement walls had stopped the horde, and the horde retaliated in their own way, as a number of L2s came towards the walls. L2s were strong monsters and could pummel the cement walls. Pum, pum. The L2 had just gotten close to the walls when 300 snipers hidden from view quickly sniped the L2s. The L2s could withstand the bullets of normal rifles, but the high-caliber bullets from the sniper rifles were enough to splatter their brains. As the L2s got close to the walls, they were immediately killed by the snipers, causing even more of a blockade. Yue Zhong's forces were then able to continue to slaughter the zombies. Deep within the horde, the mutant zombie that had a huge head closed its eyes, its mouth twisted in an ugly expression. The horde suddenly split apart, and 10,000 L2s came charging out carrying H1s. The H1s opened their mouths and sent large fireballs blasting on the cement walls, destroying them. "Fire the artillery!" Li Guang saw that things were turning bad and quickly gave the order. Hong, hong, hong. The artillery forces from afar began to fire rapidly, sending volleys of heavy fire raining upon the zombies, blasting many of them into pieces. The 10,000 L2s and H1s were incinerated instantly. For the sake of supporting the battle in Ningyu Gorge, Yue Zhong had sent out 80% of his artillery forces of the Central Plains. As the ammunition for artillery was precious, Li Guang would also only use it at the most pressing of times. The 10,000 L2s and H1s were turned into ash, and a mutant zombie within the horde opened its eyes, a murderous look flashing across them. It leapt into the chest of an L4 and urged it back. Any being with intelligence had a common trait, which was the fear of death. If they weren't scared, Balu wouldn't have been subdued so easily. Even Yue Zhong himself was not entirely unafraid of death. The L4 continued all the way to a secretive location at the back before it stopped. As it retreated, a large number of the ordinary zombies continued to attack Ningyu Gorge. Under the blows of the H1, the cement walls on the front lines were blasted into nothing. After a harsh round of firing, the soldiers quickly abandoned their posts and retreated to the secondary defense line. The army had constructed a number of defenses, and Yue Zhong was clear that there was no way for the first line to withhold the entire horde. At the secondary defense, there were a whole bunch of low cement walls as well. The huge sea of zombies were once again held up by the walls, and many of their heads were shot. After the mutant zombie had escaped to a safe place, the huge sea of zombie abruptly started to retreat. "What's going on?" Li Guang watched the huge sea of zombies retreat, his eyes flashing with shock, and a bad feeling arose in his heart. After all, zombies have never been known to retreat. They only knew how to advance and tear into their enemies, or get torn apart by their enemies. The zombies retreated, and suddenly 50,000 L2s and 100,000 S2s charged out from their midst, together with 3,000 L3s. This zombie unit of over 150,000 zombies galloped forward like a sharp knife, making their ways for the second defense line viciously. Calling for artillery strike, Li Guang watched the appearance of these 150,000 zombies, his face unsightly. The pressure from these 150,000 evolved zombies was even stronger than 1,000,000 ordinary zombies. Against the ordinary zombies, Li Guang could still make use of the various traps to wipe them out. However, against the L2s and L3s, the traps were basically useless. Even the 1.5m high cement walls could be destroyed in a single punch. Hong, hong, hong. As the rounds of artillery fire rained upon the 150,000 zombies, a huge number of them were blasted to pieces. However, even the powerful artillery strike couldn't possibly wipe out all the evolved zombies. Many of the L2s managed to evade the heavy fire and charged right through the cement walls. With their monstrous strength, the L2S and L3S charged right through the army camp as they started slaughtering the soldiers. Yue Zhong's soldiers started to engage in close-quarter combat, and many were quickly bitten to death or torn apart. Beasts! We could die together! One soldier was surrounded by three S2S, and as the three of them opened their jaws and bit him, he pulled the pin of his grenade. Hong! Following a loud explosion, the three S2S were blasted apart. Go to hell! One soldier saw an L3 killing his comrade with a single punch and grabbed a bag of explosives, running towards it and igniting it. With a loud boom, the L3 and the soldier were blasted together. At every part of the battlefield, many of the soldiers were fighting with their lives. Unfortunately, the sheer numbers and the sudden assault of the zombies overwhelmed the forces at the second defense line. The evolved zombies that got through might be only a small portion of the entire sea of zombies. However, they were not a force ordinary soldiers could stand up to. When the zombies overran the second defense line, they did not rush everywhere, instead allowing the forces behind to fill up until all 150,000 came in, before continuing for the third defense line. Such a tactic was truly terrifying. Even if the artillery fire had taken out about 50,000 zombies, the unit of evolved zombies quickly managed to destroy the third defense line and killed about 100 soldiers that were retreating. With such a strategy, the evolved zombies continued to wreak havoc on Yue Zhong's army, and the casualty count soon reached 500. Losing 500 comrades dealt a huge blow to the morale of Yue Zhong's troops. They were humans and not zombies. The force that had been stationed numbered 6,000. Losing 500 was 1/12 of their forces. Unfortunately, the vast sea of zombies seemed indomitable, and their morale dipped lower. Li Guang heard the reports coming from the front lines, his expression becoming unsightly. Damn it! What do we do? Should we retreat? One officer came up to him and said, "Regiment commander, why don't we retreat first?" Li Guang frowned, as he considered his suggestion seriously. The life and death of 5,000 soldiers riding on his shoulder weighed heavily. This was the pressure of being a commander. "We're not retreating." Just then, a voice resounded from the door. Li Guang lifted his head, his eyes flashing with excitement. "Leader, you're here." Chapter 663. Yue Zhong arrives personally. The might of the laser gun. Chapter 663. Yue Zhong arrives personally. The might of the laser gun. Yue Zhong's eyes flashed with a solemn look. "That's right. I'm here. I will go to fight together with you guys on the front lines. From now on, we definitely must not retreat a single step." "Yes." Li Guang's heart shuddered as he quickly passed the order. "Leader is here. Leader Yue Zhong is here. We'll definitely win. We'll definitely win." Yue Zhong's arrival soon spread through the entire battlefield, and the soldiers on the front lines instantly cheered in a resounding roar, and their morale instantly skyrocketed. Hong! 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 Round after round of artillery fire rained down upon those evolved zombies, blasting them into pieces. Yue Zhong wore a black leather suit and brought a heavy mace that weighed at least a few hundred kgs and was about 3 m long, charging to the front lines with a few evolvers and began to mash the evolved zombies. The situation had seemed dire until Yue Zhong appeared and the tide suddenly turned. The soldiers were filled with a renewed confidence, a certainty that they would win this battle purely because of Yue Zhong. Yue Zhong, this man is really too fearsome. Ran watched as the moment Yue Zhong appeared, and the morale as well as the combat intensity of the soldiers began to skyrocket as a complicated look appeared in his eyes. Having won battle after battle, Yue Zhong's troops were basically convinced that Yue Zhong was a war god. As long as he appeared, victory was sure to be theirs. When Lianda Zhong heard the news of Yue Zhong's arrival, even he heaved a sigh of relief and chuckled. "The leader is here. We're sure to win." Ran glanced at him and back at his own subordinates, and noticed that even his generals and soldiers had relaxed considerably. Li Guang saw that the situation was stabilizing and asked, "Leader, why do we have to stand our ground here? If we continue fighting here, we will definitely suffer." Yue Zhong's expression was grave as he replied, "We have discovered that there are many evolved zombies here. Based on the intelligence and conjecture, those evolved zombies can consume the dead zombies to evolve further. If we fight and retreat, although we can destroy the ordinary zombies, it will result in even more evolved ones. If we retreat all the way, at the end, we might even have to face over 1 million Type 2 evolved zombies." Li Guang's face fell and gasped, "What?" The terror of the evolved zombies had been etched deep in Li Guang's mind after the battle today. They were simply on another level. If they had to deal with 1 million ordinary zombies, just cement walls and traps were enough to block them, leaving the soldiers to pick them off slowly. However, just 150,000 of them were enough to charge through a rain of heavy artillery and smash through the various obstructions and traps, decimating many of the soldiers. 1 million evolved zombies were much more terrifying than 4 million ordinary zombies. 150,000 of those Type 2 evolved zombies were enough to give Li Guang a huge headache. If he had to face 1 million of them, it was sure to be a disaster. After all, other than the high-level enhancers, none of the ordinary soldiers could take on any Type 2 evolved zombies in close combat. Hearing Yue Zhong's words, no one dared to insist on retreating. That would only give the zombies opportunities to evolve. Under the joint attacks of the artillery and the special forces led by Yue Zhong, as well as the support of the various structures, Yue Zhong's forces forcefully held their positions and defended the place. As Yue Zhong's army slowly left, a huge number of zombies were gobbling up the corpses of their fallen comrades, including the flesh of the evolved zombies. Amongst them, there were even a number of devourers. At this time, 30 assault helicopters suddenly appeared in the horizon, shooting past the vast sea of zombies and releasing countless napalm bombs. The moment the incendiary explosives landed on the ground, they exploded and turned into a huge sea of flames, enveloping the zombies. The flames raged on, incinerating huge numbers of zombies at once. Those ordinary zombies and evolved zombies that were feasting on their comrades' flesh were burnt to death. A few hundred devourers managed to dash away, escaping in various directions. The moment these devourers were allowed to grow and reach their full potential, they would be terrifying existences at level 70, which even tanks could not affect. The speed of the devourers was shocking as they weaved in and out of the flames. However, the coverage of the flames was extensive, and even though the devourers were fast, they were unable to escape in the end. The skin of the devourers could withstand the flames, but their brains could not stop frying under the high temperatures. Their slightly burning corpses slumped to the ground. When the hundreds of the devourers were killed, the huge-head mutant zombie, hidden dozens of kilometers away, seethed in rage. The devourers were one of the strongest evolved zombies at this point, and only an L4 could consume the devourers. However, in terms of speed, the devourers surpassed the L4s. 400 devourers were more than enough to eradicate 40,000 L2s. This was how terrifying they could be. To any zombie horde, any existences below the L3 could be lost. However, devourers and Type 3 zombies were hard to come by. They were the core of a horde. The devourers had been killed by the napalm bombs, causing the huge-head mutant zombie to be enraged. It closed its eyes and sent out its consciousness. Within the horde, a number of L4s led 100,000 L2s and 300,000 S2s, together with 500 devourers as they charged towards the direction of Ningyu Gorge. There were over 60 L4s, each of them towering above 4M, and their strength monstrous. They could easily grab a tank like a toy. If they got close, they could even pummel a tank flat. Furthermore, as long as the cannons of the tanks did not hit their heads, they could only injure the L4s slightly, but not kill them. Seeing the strange movements of the evolved zombies, many soldiers turned pale. The projectiles of the heavy firearms only bounced of the L4S, and even grenade launchers could do nothing to them. Send an artillery strike to blanket the entire area. Yue Zhong watched the approaching elite horde and ordered coldly, "Hong! Hong! Hong!" With his command, the artillery forces went all out to fire multiple volleys at the hundreds of thousands of evolved zombies. As the artillery fire rained down, many of the evolved zombies were blasted into bits and pieces. Even so, a substantial number of them managed to rush out and got closer to the camp, with 7 or 8 L4S leading the way. A creature like the L4 was enough to charge through a bunch of evolvers. Not only was it impervious to most weapons and bullets, its strength was terrifying, and it had the ability to infect. An entire group of hundreds of enhancers at level 30 would not be able to do anything to it. A single L4 could decimate an entire infantry battalion. Li Guang and the other intelligence officers watched the nearing L4S with pale faces. The moment the L4S reached their camp, they would have no choice but to abandon the place. Their gazes fell upon Yue Zhong, only to discover he was still calm. Yue Zhong's eyes flashed coldly as he ordered, "2nd Special Forces Battalion, go." The moment he gave the order, 500 soldiers rushed out with weapons that were about 1.5 m long, the muzzle's caliber of about 25 millimeters, and the entire body silver in color. These 500 soldiers adjusted their weapons to face the L4S and began firing. A number of white beams shot towards the heads of the L4S, easily penetrating their heads, leaving holes of 25 millimeters diameter. These guns were the latest products of research under Yue Zhong scientists, the ultra-high-tech laser guns. With these weapons, the thick armor of the L4S were basically ineffective. The 500 soldiers had gone through job change and were at least level 30, possessing the marksmanship skill and enhancing them. They could aim accurately and fire at the heads of the L4S. As one L4 was fired by those beams, its brain was fried instantly, and it slumped to the ground. The rest of the L4S suffered similar fates. Before even reaching the camp, their heads were pierced by the laser guns, and they died. Long live leader! Long live leader Yue Zhong! Seeing the heads of the L4S pierced through and their corpses slumping to the ground, the entire battlefield erupted in cheers as the morale reached an all-time high. Hua Ran saw the weapons, his eyes flashing with shock and fear. Those are laser weapons. Another form of high-tech equipment. He could actually produce those. Truly fearsome. Chapter 664, Cunning Zombie. Chapter 664, Cunning Zombie. The might of the laser weapons was evident to everybody, piercing even the L4S. Hua Ran did not think that he could withstand such might as well. Should he try to rebel, he would have to face 500 of these weapons. He might have the means to resist bullets, but against laser weapons, there was nothing he could do. With the technology in Yue Zhong's hands, many experts did not dare harbor any more strange thoughts. Li Guang watched the L4S die and spoke excitedly to Yue Zhong. "Leader, this is a laser gun. We hope that the 1st Regiment can get these." If the entire 1st Regiment could get these weapons, their might would increase greatly. Many mutant beasts and high-level zombies were not afraid of bullets, causing major headaches for the soldiers. If they had these weapons, they could take care of these problems, and ordinary soldiers could also kill evolved zombies. The entire regiment? You think these are cabbages? Yue Zhong chuckled and rebuked him in amusement. These are the latest developments over at Guangxi. After all their efforts, they only managed to produce 500 of them. Based on the current manufacturing rate, there's only about 300 each month. Asking for 10,000 right away, you think the rest of the forces aren't asking the same? If it wasn't for the seriousness of the situation, I would not have deployed them here. The laser gun had been something Yue Zhong insisted on researching. The many Japan researchers and people who went through the scientist job change had been thrown into the research, this was how he managed to produce them. However, even after the success of the research, he still lacked the necessary equipment and resources. That was why they had only managed to produce 500 laser guns. Furthermore, the usage in this dire situation displayed their effectiveness. Li Guang had a fawning expression, like this: "Leader, why don't you leave these 500 with us first? Isn't your next target the capital? As long as we have these 500 laser guns, we can utilize it to reach there faster. If those 500 laser guns were left with them, they could use them against the L4S. Even mutant beasts with powerful defenses would no longer be an issue." Yue Zhong laughed mildly. "I'll consider it. We'll have to see the performance of every unit this time." Li Guang crossed his hands over his chest. "Leader, rest assured, our first regiment will definitely contribute the most." Yue Zhong replied with a grin, before turning around to observe the situation. On the ground, there were artillery fire and the attacks from the assault rifles enveloping the evolved zombies, killing them before they even got close to the defense line. The tank-like L4S suffered the worst, the laser beams penetrating their heads, causing them to slump dead. The laser guns were concentrated on the L4S, leaving the rest of the evolved zombies open to the cannons and artillery fire, as well as the elite forces led by Yue Zhong. The zombies that could actually get through the flames and bombs weren't many, and were easily taken out by Yue Zhong and her subordinates. The intense battle continued for over 2 hours before the horde started to retreat under the command of the huge head mutant zombie. Not good. This zombie has a strong learning capability. Yue Zhong watched the retreating horde and frowned. If it was in the past, the zombies would definitely not retreat. However, they had somehow retreated after realizing they could not penetrate Yue Zhong's defense lines, causing him to be solemn. The commander behind this horde was getting smarter and seemed to be capable of human-like intelligence. The smarter the zombie commander, the more dangerous it was for humanity. Yu Hong could easily destroy and defeat million-strong hordes was because they were too stupid, and the Z2S were usually cowardly and foolish as well. The Z2S only had a certain degree of intelligence and could just command a large horde. However, this time round, the commander was obviously much more capable than the Z2S. Under Yue Zhong's orders, the 30 assault helicopters flew over the horde, dropping napalm bombs everywhere. The flames quickly spread out and enveloped large patches of the horde, incinerating many of the ordinary and some evolved zombies. What a pity! If only I had more heavy fire, these zombies would just be an appetizer. Yue Zhong watched the burning sea of flames and thought silently. The hidden mutant zombie eyed the 30 assault helicopters coldly and burrowed into the L4's chest. Soon after, the 2,200,000 strong horde began to retreat towards Bao Xi City. Long live! Long live! Seeing the huge horde retreating, the soldiers all burst out in cheers. The 3 million zombies had given them a pressure they never felt before. The moment the zombies left, they all heaved a sigh of relief. Hua Ran saw the remaining two zombies leaving, his eyes brightening. 3rd Brigade chase. Soon, Hua Ran led the 3,000 riders of the 3rd Brigade and chased after the retreating zombies, firing at them. Li Guang watched Hua Ran charging out and his brows furrowed, bellowing in anger. Hua Ran, that guy really acts fast. 3rd Platoon, move out. Don't let those asses from the 3rd Brigade get one over us. 1,000-strong motorcycle riders swiftly moved out towards the zombies. Just as Hua Ran and his men were hunting the zombies, all of a sudden, the horde split, and 50 devourers, 100 S4S, 1,000 S3S, and 10,000 S2S charged out. This speedy unit suddenly pounced towards Hua Ran's 3rd Brigade. Not good. Retreat. Retreat. Hua Ran watched as the zombies charged out, his expression falling, and he quickly roared. The 3,000 riders were also elites of the Central Plains, and quickly urged their horses back. The 104S exploded out with a terrifying speed, many times faster than even the fastest sports car, and they quickly chased up to the 3,000 riders, pulling some of them down and ripping their throats before tearing into them. Soon, over dozens of them had been pulled down from their mounts. The speed of the S4S was terrifying, and unless they were high-level evolvers, the moment they were caught, they would be ripped apart. Beast! Fucking beast! Hua Ran immediately caused his body to be covered with his signature blood dough chi, and he waved his silver curved blade, slashing the S4S that got close to him into two. As a peak expert, those S4S still couldn't do much to him. As he was killing those S4S, the 1000S, 3S, and 50 Devourers managed to catch up. Their speed might not be able to match the S4S, but their speed and strength was higher than the black-scaled stallions, catching up only in moments. One of the Devourers leaped atop a rider, opening its huge mouth to bite the rider, tearing his heart out before absorbing his blood essence. Another Devourer opened its jaws to spit out a gas of poison, which instantly corroded 6 riders, causing them to fall off their mounts. The black gas covered their bodies, and their flesh started to emit a rotting stench. 1S3 charged right at a rider, pulling him off his mount and tearing into him. Faced with this sudden assault, the riders of the 3rd Brigade could not help but scream in fear as they were taken down one by one. Yue Zhong watched this horror unfold, his expression unsightly. Fuck! When did the zombies become so cunning? They actually know how to utilize their elites to trap our soldiers. Hua Ran watched in despair. It's over. Is our 3rd Brigade going to fall here? At this time, the unit of evolved zombies showcased their terrifying nature, surrounding the 3rd Brigade and tearing into the soldiers. If no support came, the entire 3rd Brigade was sure to fall. Hua Ran was clear about Yue Zhong's wariness and caution against him. He had taken a risk to chase after the zombies, and if Yue Zhong did not save him, it wasn't anything unexpected. Hua Ran thought about it. If he was in Yue Zhong's position, he would also let Yue Zhong die. After all, his position amongst the Mongolian riders was too high, exceeding that of Yue Zhong. As long as Hua Ran was not dead, many of the Mongolian riders would not be truly loyal to Yue Zhong. At this time, the sounds of intense machine gun fire came from the skies, raining upon the zombies. There were some cannon rounds as well that blasted the Devourers into pieces. With the support of the assault helicopters, Hua Ran led the remaining 2,100 riders out of their encirclement and fled from the evolved zombies. Chapter 665, Obtaining Bao Xi City. Chapter 665, Obtaining Bao Xi City. The evolved zombies had launched a quick attack, and now they slowly begun to retreat. Seeing this, the rest of the troops that had intended to chase were filled with alarm and did not dare to chase too close. Ming also recalled his troops slightly, following the motorcycle unit of the 1st Regiment. With the support of the assault helicopters, they slowly chipped away at the huge zombie horde. The Devourers and S4S were considered a precious fighting force amongst the zombies as well, and after that retaliation, they didn't make any more strange movements, allowing Ming's forces to kill the ordinary zombies at the outskirts. As the soldiers chased, all of a sudden, a force consisting of 20,000 L2S and S2S charged out, while the rest of the horde separated into 4 parts as they made for Ming's forces. With this sudden movement, Ming and his men felt the pressure and had no choice but to retreat while sending troops to take the evolved zombies out. If they did not clear these zombies, their path of retreat would be cut off and they would suffer on both sides. The force comprising of the evolved zombies was strong. With their numbers, Ming and his soldiers were outmatched and at a disadvantage. If they were not careful, they could be wiped out. Without any base, fortifications, traps, or the support of other weapons, 50,000 evolved zombies were more than enough to wipe out the forces Yue Zhong had established out here in the Central Plains. After all, humans could not stand against evolved zombies. The zombie commander is really learning. Yue Zhong watched the tactics of the evolved zombies, and his brows furrowed. Yue Zhong had experience facing the Z1S and Z2S. They could at most just gather the scattered zombies, and would only command them to use their numbers to overwhelm a target. There were no strategies or tactics involved. A horde of this size was already terrifying. Once they learned to utilize war tactics, the threat level would heighten. The moment the zombie horde split into four, it was difficult to eradicate them completely. Ming led the 2nd Brigade towards the backup sent by the 1st Regiment, with 20 tanks taking the lead as they fought against the 20,000 evolved zombies for over 4 hours. They suffered 20 casualties before fully wiping them out. After Ming and his forces wiped out the 20,000 evolved zombies, the sky was turning dark, and the soldiers had no way of chasing after the zombie horde. At night, the fighting capabilities of humans would suffer, while the zombies were not affected. The retreat caused the soldiers to relax, and there were sounds of joy and cheers everywhere. They might not have wiped out the 4 million zombies, but after close to a month of battle, they had already wiped out close to 2 million of them, and this caused them to feel a sense of pride and achievement. Yue Ran came up to Yue Zhong with a complicated look and said, "Many thanks, leader." In the battle earlier, had Yue Zhong not sent timely help, even if Yue Ran had managed to escape from the zombies with his strength, his 3rd Brigade would have been lost entirely. Yue Zhong eyed him and replied mildly, "There's no need to thank me. Since you're my subordinate and fought for me on the battlefield, I would not abandon you. However, if you were to harbor any thoughts you shouldn't, then don't blame me for being merciless." Yue Ran, having been the leader of the entire Mongolian Empire, was definitely an ambitious man. His capabilities were definitely outstanding, and amongst Yue Zhong's subordinates, no one could possibly control a huge force the way Yue Ran did with the Mongol riders. Since Yue Zhong wanted to quickly extend his power, he had to fight the zombies with Yue Ran's help. Yue Ran replied with a bitter smile, "Yes, Yue Ran will bear leader's words in mind." The huge horde retreated, gathering together before heading towards Bao Xi City. Yue Zhong deployed his 1st Regiment, which had the tanks, Ming's 2nd Brigade, and Yue Ran's 3rd Brigade as they chased after the horde. The 30 assault helicopters continued to rain napalm bombs down on the zombies, incinerating large patches of zombies. Due to the lack of artillery fire, Ming and the rest had to be wary of the potential sudden attacks of the evolved zombies. They continued their guarded assault and only managed to kill another 400,000 zombies. The horde retreated to Bao Xi City and did not stop, instead continuing towards the north. After the continuous assault and chase, the fuel and ammunition spent by Yue Zhong's forces had started to accumulate. The factories continued to churn out ammunition, but under such circumstances, Yue Zhong could only call for a halt. Yue Zhong came up to Yue Zhong, dressed in her tight military suit, as she reported, "Bao Xi City is under our control now. We have lost 120 soldiers of the Scum Battalion, 6 from 1st Regiment, 7 from the 2nd Brigade, 13 from the 3rd Brigade. The guns we found in Bao Xi City number." The moment the zombies left Bao Xi City, Yue Zhong quickly led his troops to take over the city and clean out the remaining zombies. Most of the zombies had been commanded to leave by the mutant zombie. However, a few were still trapped within the various structures. Cleaning up was a dangerous job, and from time to time, there would be a few casualties. Yue Zhong carried a piece of document and eyed Yue Zhong. "Currently, based on the reports, Bao Xi City is already under our control, and we should be able to clean it up fully within a week." Yue Zhong closed his eyes and heaved a sigh of relief. Bao Xi City and Bao Xi City were 2 large cities on the Central Plains, and there were many large-type factories within them. As long as they were within his control, with adequate manpower, he could begin manufacturing his ammunition. The mutant zombie might have developed human-like intelligence, but it still did not fully understand the importance of a city to humankind. Bao Yin and Bao Xi landed up in Yue Zhong's hands, and in only a short period of time, he could turn them to boost his military forces and churn out ammunition. With enough ammunition, he could deal with large hordes. This time, the fact that he could deal with 2 million zombies, other than his subordinates, the main reason was that he had the ammunition to back his forces. Without the ammunition and fuel, the tanks and helicopters were just useless metal. After this single battle, his expenditure had been massive. Especially the fuel, it had almost wiped out all that he had gained from Ulan mountain range. He had no way of continuing the chase, and could only watch as the horde continued north. Yue Zhong knew that letting them go was going to be a huge disaster, but he had no means of wiping them out entirely in the short future. Almost a year had gone past since the world had changed, and although Yue Zhong had regained Bai Yin and Bao Xi, there was no notification of any levels gained. This was because the time limit for the mission he had accepted was over, and the conquering of cities was no longer on the mission board of the God and Devil system. Only the reclamation of the capital still had some incentives. Yue Zhong knew that with just a little more time, his forces would become stronger. He opened his eyes and looked at Yue Zhong. Her tight attire accentuated her mature curves fully, looking extremely attractive. Yue Zhong could feel the heated gaze of Yue Zhong on herself, and her face flushed slightly as a sense of confidence arose in her heart. There was a slight sexual tension in the room. At this moment, an officer came to the door and knocked, disrupting the atmosphere, reporting. Yue Zhong eyed the officer and replied solemnly, "Come in. What is it?" The soldier replied solemnly, "Leader, our unmanned drones have discovered 30,000 soldiers making their way towards us from Mongolia." Yue Zhong's face fell as he stood up abruptly. Ran has rebelled. Ran's position amongst the Mongols was important. If he chose to rebel now, Yue Zhong would be forced to wipe them out. The 3rd Brigade were all decent elite soldiers, and Yue Zhong could not bear to kill them. The officer quickly explained, "No, leader, it's not Ran. It's the Mongol Empire from the outer parts of Mongolia." Yue Zhong heaved a sigh of relief and swiftly made his way to his command center. "Leader." The moment Yue Zhong entered the command center, the officers quickly saluted. Yue Zhong looked towards the display and noticed the 30,000-strong troops on top of their mounts galloping towards Bai Yin City. These soldiers led plenty of their livestock, as well as their horses. They were accompanied by tanks and armored vehicles, while a few Eurocopters and some Russian Mi-24 assault helicopters accompanied them in the skies. Kingdom of God. Damn bastards. Yue Zhong took a look at the images taken by the unmanned drones, and his eyes flashed coldly, his fists clenched tightly, as a tinge of fury arose in his heart. Before the apocalypse, the strength of the outer parts of Mongolia wasn't strong, and their military was definitely incomparable with the rest of the country. However, they suddenly had over 100 assault helicopters. It was evident someone had supported them. The only power that could do that was the Kingdom of God. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.